It's Friday, my dudes.
TGIF, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Iron Realm Media's Have No Fear show. Another Friday afternoon. Glad to be with you. We are joined by John, Adam, Zach, Walt, and my name is Josh Corey. Glad to be with you. We're going to have a great show. We've got Nathan Oakley. Hopefully, fingers crossed, Anthony Riley is going to be sliding into. And I do believe Ranty Flat Earth will be joining us, so great updates. One of my favorite shows, because I don't have to do much. I love it. So let's just give a quick hello to everybody. Let's just say real quick to one Mr. Skitty John Savage. John, I want to ask how you're doing, but I'm not sure anybody really knows, even you.
Yeah, I was just saying I've just fumed myself with diesel fumes in the bus here by turning on the heating. I was fucking around with the exhaust and yeah, I'm not quite sure if I'm coming or going at the moment, but moving on swiftly. Looking forward to the show. Excuse any fumbles I make.
Consider them excused. You've got a perfectly legitimate reason, I think. And then fresh out of the shop after a hard day's work, the Adam Meakin. Sir, how was your day?
Been a busy one, matey. Quick sound check. I'm at two hot guys because I'm super paranoid again after last week. But yeah, no, it was. I've been trying to catch up on the show, Josh. I've not even had a chance to catch up and listen to the guys. So literally, it was set the show, get the guys in onto the Skype call. Crazy ass day's work. Said goodbye to him. I managed that. Didn't forget my manners. And yeah, just been at it again till I got back tonight, mate. It's even been 10 o'clock gone before really even spoke to John. So yeah, busy day, mate. Busy day, but looking forward to this evening. Got a good bit of chatter going off, haven't we? I hope so.
We do. I was just pulling up the chat room, the live chat. I might actually try to participate a little bit this week. I've been taking it off, trying to stay a little bit more focused. But we do have quite a few people in there already, so welcome, everybody. How about our wandering nomad, Zachary, Mr. Too Nice for Rice, Zabala. How's your day been? We just spoke this morning.
Yeah, it's, well, I'm in another state now. I'm all the way into California for the first time ever.
Oh, wow. Well, I just got off work, so I am in the process of getting into another state, so don't mind me.
But yeah, it's gorgeous out here. I said it was going to be 93 degrees, but sit in the shade. There's a nice breeze. It doesn't feel any hotter than 80 back home, how it would have been with a lot of humidity. It's so dry out here. It's just gorgeous. Found a nice spot. Took me a while to get it all set up. I had to do a lot of clearing out and stuff like that to get a nice shady spot. But yeah, I'm loving life, man. It's a beautiful day.
That takes me back to my days in boot camp. Having to sleep out there in the California, not necessarily desert, but there's some pretty rough terrain out there. You can get pretty dry. But you're right, the heat is so much nicer than it is basically anywhere east of the Rockies. And then last but never, ever, ever least, my good friend and co-host over there on Truth Frequency Radio's Ironworks every Tuesday and Friday, hopefully soon to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. One Mr. Walter Johnson. Walt, I know you said you probably weren't going to try to get a nap in. So how you doing? You with us? Are you a little skitty yourself?
I'm making it. I'm fine. Napless, stressed over my phone issues, but I am here. I am ready for Friday. We had an amazing show this morning, and I'm looking forward to the one we have lined up right now. How was the rest of your day, Josh? That's really the question, sir.
You know, it was good. It was It was good. It's always nice to always continually impress the management and the supervisor staff at work. So it's always nice to do that on a new job. But
I'm
it's
so glad to hear that. I truly am, man.
easy. I'm telling you, I don't know why they don't have monkeys trained to do this. I'm pretty sure with a little bit of effort, you could train a monkey to do my job here. But I don't know. Maybe because we do get involved in some of the special instruments and some of the really smaller scalpels, microscopic scalpels and things like that, that I suppose maybe a monkey couldn't do it, but well. It was still a good day.
Don't sell yourself short, mate.
I try not to. Well, it's not true. I'm very self-deprecating. But it's not the kitchen, which is a change.
Yeah.
It's something that I really know nothing about. So I'm learning all sorts of stuff, which is really one of my favorite parts of starting any job, is trying to find something I can learn that's new. So it's still good. It's still a good day. I've not had a nap either. I've been running around. My son is taking his ACTs in the morning. So we had a whole thing with trying to get his work situated and on the same page as everybody else as to what my son's priorities actually are. Then we had to get all of his paperwork and stuff printed off, and I still had to go pick him up from his mother's house. And so I just came sliding in here at the last minute myself. So I'm glad we could at least start close to on time. It was pretty darn close, I think.
I think that was closer than when we've been here for half an hour previous, Josh.
Are people hearing us, though? That's the question. Has it all gone out blank?
Well, that's the great thing about chat. You never know, because chat has a life of its own. We could be absolutely just be nothing going out, but we wouldn't know because there's so many beautiful, intelligent people in the chat carrying on the great conversations that, you know.
Well, unless we've got a kind of geo-streamer type coincidence, Sleeping Warrior's talking about ACTs, so who knows, but I would suggest we're out.
I'm hearing us on my YouTube here, so I think we're out there. They're hearing us. Thank you, Ranty.
My microphone.
I mean, sorry, I see that's
broadcast.
There's Spanish chicken.
But I think this is going to be a really good show. This is a revelatory show. I think there's going to be lots of good things to be gleaned. So I hope people stick around because there's going to be lots of lots of information. There's going to be some really cool stuff that I think comes out that I think is needed.
I wish I could remember what we talked about on Wednesday.
Isn't that great? It's like every day's a new day.
It is.
It's like the epitome of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just one day at a time.
Diesel Fumes Anonymous. Adam.
Sorry?
Nope, I was enjoying it. Keep going.
Yeah, no, that's as good as it gets. Morning, John.
As usual, I have no fucking idea what you're whistling, what you're on about.
It weren't Colonel Bogey. And
I'll give up asking you to explain.
It was an attempt at Groundhog Day, but I will.
Groundhog Day has a tune. I've watched that film several times.
Isn't that a polka tune? Isn't that polka music?
Yes, it is.
Isn't polka a dance?
Or a dot?
Or a dot?
Ask Weird Al, I don't know.
Well, it didn't take us too long to get off track there, did it?
Not at all. We're still trying to get back on track. Oh my gosh. All right. I've got.
Well, before we get too far, guys.
I'm sharing a link. Everybody share a link. If you haven't shared a link out there, I'm doing it even as I speak.
Walt's doing it as opposed to a polka. Walt, get it? Sorry.
Haha.
No.
It's another dance and or type of music.
Waltz, right. Okay. Yes, Adam, what were you saying?
I don't know. I'm off to bed. I'm bored.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a great night. This has been great. This is Josh Corey. The rest of Iron Road Media is flattered down.
Where's my bag of glue?
But look, we all know where you've been. He's anyone that doesn't know, John's been under the. I don't know if he's run out of weed or something, but he's been under the van sniffing the back of the exhaust. So he's a bit lightheaded.
Don't make excuses for me. Get on with the fucking show.
There'll be teenagers now going like, "Yeah, you're going to go and do a bit of exhaust." But yeah, you fancy doing a bit of exhaust at 4:20?
Let's all gather around in our garage and shut the garage door and just leave the car running and see what happens.
Am I the only
All
one
right.
that did that?
I've got it all
Okay,
shared
do
up.
not
I've got
try
it all
that.
summed up.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
We need to focus. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll
so
wait. Don't let that go.
Well, I was going to ramble a bit about the rest of my week, other than a busy day today. I had a great day on Monday when I met up with the guys.
Please.
Who obviously we had on TFR this morning. A big shout out to Harry, John Smith, Groveline, Jason, Tommy Disbury, and Roxanne, Globalist Denier. Awesome people, real pleasure.
Yeah, tell us how that went, Adam.
Well, no, like it's rare, isn't it? Even for a TFR show that I get up, because I'm not known. I'm not known for my early starts, but I did get up early to try and think. Right, I want to get down Nottingham, meet the guys, and have a good day at it. And by lunchtime, there was nothing going off, and then popped up on YouTube, and there's Jason under the van doing some work, and Roxanne kind of
Under the
explaining.
van, see? It's addictive.
See what I mean? Yeah, I tell you, there'll be a government infomercial soon, mate. Exhaust. Yeah, so I'm seeing it, and I'm staring at this video, and I'm thinking, I know that car park. I'm sure I know where that is. And it's in the end, I got in the chat, and Roxanne kind of went up to the paying display meter so I could read where it was. But it's just a mile down the road, so I rocked up. I heard this morning a little bit, I think, thinking who the bloody hell was that turning up?
So you stalked them.
Well, I pulled into the car park, and trying to be a cheery chap. I gave it a bit on the horn.
The internet. You cross-referenced it and pinpointed their exact location and snuck up on them while they were crawling around underneath on the ground. That's basically what I...
Sniffing their exhausts.
Well,
See, this is why I don't tell you where I live, Meakin.
yeah, well, I've figured it out, mate. I'm rocking up soon. It's so I gave it a bit on the horn and was just shouting, keep it flat, sticking. It could have looked like a Nazi salute, to be honest, coming out the window, because it was hard. The window wasn't fully down. I don't know, but it was keep it flat. I just pulled round and had a good chat with the guys, and they were obviously struggling, and they were I don't know how they ended up where they were, because they'd gone all the way across Nottingham and north to end up in this car park. So I ended up having a great day, getting them into town, dropping them off, and then picking them up, and then we went for a pint afterwards. So really, really lovely people, and I think, as you've said today,
What, in the Porsche?
we went in the 4x4, yeah, in the station wagon,
The Nottingham tractor.
yeah. It was fully loaded with flat Earth, huge banners and stuff. So we needed a big motor. So yeah, bollocks, Savage.
Well, they were really grateful for that trip from their bus to where they were setting up, because they said it was going to be quite the haul, and you just sort of shuttled them and all their gear and saved them the walk, which really meant a lot to them, because they've made that walk lots of times, and sometimes they've got to park pretty far away, so to be given shuttle service was top notch.
You're a good stalker. Well done.
So
Well, hearing their stories this morning was amazing. I mean, normally in our morning show, we're interacting a whole lot with our chat, and sometimes we get so totally sidetracked with the chat. A totally new topic will come up, and the show will just get somewhere else. But even the people in chat today were all just chilling and listening to the stories. It was really great. Some very touching stuff. And yes, the story about the deaf couple was amazing. It was.
Oh, I heard them talking about that. That was awesome. That was on your broadcast, Adam, when they said that they were trying to sign language to two deaf people, and the penny dropped. They were like, "Ah, right,
Right. You could
it's
just
not a
see the
ball."
aha moment. Right, right.
They didn't get that on video, did they?
they did.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah, just
Cool.
Harry's channel, the John Smith Globe Live.
Globe Live, yeah, excellent. I'll have to see that because I only heard them talking about it. I didn't
What
see
was
it.
cool is we were kind of talking before they got to that story. We were talking about how a lot of people's issues and problems with trying to see through all the lies and trying to see that some of this, that they've been taught as fact may not be fact. A lot of that is definitely tied into how much television they watch on a daily basis and the mind control that they're exposed to. And the fact that these people, due to their disability, are very removed from that mind control. It does speak a lot to how quickly, in spite of their disability or their inability to actually communicate fully, they picked it up right away. It was just,
It makes
beautiful,
perfect
beautiful
sense.
to hear.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? And that's so true. So many people think they're capable and awake enough to watch TV or radio or whatever, but half the time, what comes into our head, we can't remember where we heard it, but we did hear it, but often we think it's an original thought or idea, or you're on the cutting edge or something, but very often it's just mentioned on TV or something along those lines. I've caught myself doing it numerous times. That's why I don't watch anything. I don't listen to anything. I don't read anything mainstream if I can at all help it. But still, crap creeps into my head. Just watching YouTube videos and stuff. Something will creep into your head. I see it in my kids as well. I don't think anyone's immune. This stuff is designed. Has been for years and years and years, Tavistock Institute and all that sort of fun stuff. I don't think anyone's immune to its manipulative.
And I kind of did a little self-experiment accidentally. I, do a lot of time away from TV and a lot of time not even watching, YouTube, things like that. I'll go for stretches of just leaving it alone, just to kind of decompress. And when I go back to it, or when she talks me into sitting down and watching some, cooking show or something, within minutes, literally, I'm nodding out because of the hypnosis vibe, the frequencies, all of it. Just put me into a state of complete relaxation. And that's what it does. It gets you ready for any kind of suggestion, any kind of thought they're throwing at you with the scripts or whatever. So it definitely... I mean, it's designed to do what it does. And if you don't think it's true, go out there. The patent number, I used to know it, but I'll have to find it.
John, you did read a bit of mainstream this week.
Probably.
Or you saw my mug in the paper.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're prompting me and hinting to me instead of just telling me what the hell you're talking about. Nottingham Post, yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist. They didn't mention your name though, so that's a good thing.
No, it was very odd.
Now.
It's very odd. We were the video's on there. You can listen to us talking. So we were chatting for a bit, and there was just me. I can't help myself. I'm trying to film it, and I had to butt in because I felt the need for a little bit of Meakin clarity. Whether it was of any help, I don't know. But so in the end, I've stood to the side as they're taking the photos, and he said, "No, get in." So I thought, well, I've had a shave.
Never had to shy away.
I've trimmed the beard. I didn't have a shave, let's be honest. But so what the hell? I thought I tried to get the IRM in, but I'll just transition it. Like, not quite got the full logo in. I feel a little Sorry, guys. My phone's in the bloody way, look. The iron stick. Strip down, you'll notice. Look. Strip down that, guys.
What are we looking at?
Oh, the streamline stick, right?
Yeah.
What are we meant to be looking at?
Oh, you won't. You have to look at on the screen. There's the picture from the post, just a man books.
Oh, I think it means you have to go watch YouTube, John. Not sharing it with us, just everybody else.
You have to watch tomorrow anyway to remember.
Oh,
so.
YouTube's just spinning, so
That's not...
fail. Anyway.
But I did read this out. But I mean, the point for me that I thought was interesting was you listen to the second live stream. I think it's about halfway in. You can hear the journalist come up to it, and that's what I'm filming. So you can hear the whole interview, Jason and Roxanne and then read the article. It's quite a nice. It's not a bad article, to be fair. It's very, very. There's sod all in it. Do you know what I mean? To be honest, but I don't think the only bit that Roxanne was.
Why don't you read it, mate? It's not that long, is it? Or we can get Josh's dulcet tones, get him off his fondle slab.
He's busy fondle slabbing. Sperm in his lap, that fondle slab as well.
Because I didn't see it as particularly.
Which article is it? The one on the site?
It's entitled "Conspiracy Theorists Try to Convince Nottingham the World Isn't Round." Try to convince Nottingham.
Conspiracy theorists.
I love local press.
Tossers.
It's funny. Shall I read it then?
Go on.
You got it? I can. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to get it to open.
I'll wait for you, Walt. I'll wait for you.
Oh, I have to accept cookies. Hold on. Let me get my cookies.
Loving that hemp hat, Josh.
Nom, 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 nom. Sorry, I'm a cookie monster.
You are a cookie monster.
You like that hat?
Love it.
That's my official Hank's handmade hemp hat.
Well remembered.
I like that hat.
I've got one. They're awesome. It kept me warm this morning while I was freezing.
Yeah, a hat like that would have kept me warm in Old Market
opened
Square.
From the Nottinghamshire Live site. Oh, no, I'm sorry. NottinghamPost.com site. This is conspiracy theorists try to convince Nottingham the world isn't round. Conspiracy theorists were out in force in Old Market Square, determined to prove that the world is not round but flat. Armed with leaflets and banners, this is part of an 8-week tour of the UK, with scores of individuals coming forward to spread the word in Nottingham on Monday, October 22nd. Calling themselves globe deniers and flat earthers, they believe that no one has landed on the moon, especially the Chinese, and that the globe does not exist. They are calling for people to challenge what we know. The tour started in Ireland and is taking in around 40 locations, finishing in London on November 3rd. Roxanne Glenn, one of the organizers, said, "We are saying, question what you've been taught. We want facts and proof. The Earth is not a globe. It is not as we know it." Jason Disbury, another organizer, said, "This is the biggest debate on the internet. No one has been on the moon. Nottingham has been amazing for us. There are a lot of people who believe they are not on this spinning ball. Nottingham has been the best place we've been to." Awesome. That was a good little article.
That was cool.
And the first comment is about intelligent reptilian overlords. I love it. Go read the comments. They're great. I'm not going to get into that because we have guests lined up, and I could spend all day with this silliness here.
Well, they regaled us with several awesome stories from their travels. And I'm sure as much as everyone would love to hear me retell a story third, fourth hand, we will actually have them on to tell it firsthand. That's right. Just stay tuned. be right back here with us next week at this same time. And we'll hear it straight from their mouths as we will have them on a
Same flat time, same flat channel.
Na 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 na.
I tried to get that phrase going way back and nobody jumped on it, so but I'll still say it. I'll be flat man. Flat man. Wow, have we lost everybody? Have I lost y'all? I can't find the call. I'm serious. I can't get back to the call. Oh, there it is. Everything's acting really strange today.
It's been that way all day.
Well, when my phone started acting up, my mind went back to about 6 videos I've seen go through my feed about some kind of event. Does anybody see the air quotes? Event that's happening right now. You know, the whole Agenda 21, everybody into the FEMA camps. I think they're using this bomb scare bullshit to kind of shut down New York and put everything, like there's troops in the streets and shit right now. So my first thought was, oh shit, this is it. This is the weekend. Nobody warned us. Everybody does know, like if you ever get a call on a Friday from your bank telling you that your ATM card is not going to be working over the weekend because they're doing some update, then go immediately to the bank, withdraw all your funds, get your go bag, and get ready to go. Because that is the key. That is the secret. When they tell you your ATM card is not going to be working over the weekend, apropos of nothing, it's fixing to go down. Just my thoughts. I'll stop being the scare porn dude.
I carry my go bag everywhere I go now.
Look, I see people hopping in the call like actual guests are here. It's already getting exciting. Oh, man.
Ooh.
Except for John. John bailed on us. John apparently succumbed to the fumes.
He just passed out and his head fell on the mouse.
Yeah, he hit the
bounced him right out of the call.
On his way down, right. Oh, man. I tell you, though, seriously, I mean, my neighbors were having trouble with their phones. I'm having trouble with my internet. My computer is acting up. Every time I click on the mute button, it's circling, and I've reset this thing I know 3 times with all of the loaded disk checks I had to do prior to the show.
I think you're both being kind and hiding John from the truth. We all know he's down to at least, up to at least 3 hits of exhaust every hour at the moment.
Right? He's got a pipe running
At
in
times.
from outside. Just
Probably what he had to do. He probably had to just bail out so he could go take a hit off the tailpipe real quick.
All right. Let me close some of this because I know my computer will crash at the wrong time at this point.
As
I
opposed
think
to
I'm going to close this show. Well, I mean, in the middle of us actually getting guests in here, I think I'm going to have to kill the chat too. Uh-oh. Do we not have Ranty?
No.
Oh, well. Well, I guess if John is not coming back, we should introduce our guests and get on with this show.
Off you go, Mr. Walter.
It's a great idea, Walt.
You know him. You love him. Let's start with Nathan Oakley from the Nathan Oakley 1980 channel. Hello, Nathan. How are you, sir?
Woo! Thank you very much for having me.
We're glad to have you. Always, man. It feels like another family member from across the pond there. I'm glad to have you guys back. And I see that you have been joined with none other than the sleeping warrior himself. What's up, Anthony? How are you, my friend?
All is good. All is good. Can you hear me?
We hear you, sir. Are you guys having some of the same technical issues over there we're having over here?
Well, no, I'm just seeing that my icons that illuminate whether my mic is like switched on and switched off is not lit up, and I can't tell if it's live or not.
That's what I keep going through. I keep worrying about I'm saying something off the air to somebody off screen, and I'm hoping y'all aren't hearing it because I can't tell anymore if it's not on or if it's on. My camera keeps going on and off. I noticed the light on it has popped off 2 or 3 times now. So if you lose us out there, we'll be back as quickly as we can.
I've got to be honest, I was disappointed by the lack of the sound effects from the audience cheering as we came in. Where was that? Come on.
Josh. That's your cue, sir.
Sorry.
He wasn't listening. There you go.
I gave you a golf clap.
Mm-hmm.
Savage is back, apparently.
Yeah, sorry about that. Internet dropped out.
See?
Joined. Hello, Riley.
Good evening, sir. How are we?
Nathan? Oh, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
And that's Nathan, is it?
It is.
Hello, Nathan.
Hello.
Sorry, I got kicked off there. Carry on. I'm sure I've interrupted.
We were just at introduction, so you really haven't interrupted at all. We're glad to have you back with us. And now I'm hearing a humongous echo on my end. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's weird. I'm going to kill my camera just for bandwidth reasons. To get more
I was
people.
just about to suggest that very thing. With more people in here, I'm going to kill my camera. So, bye. Love y'all.
So
you saw my spiders, so it's good. I'm going to turn them off.
I've been working, so I've not had a chance to keep up with the flat Earth debates like I was used to, where I could tune in to at least 1, 2 if I was lucky, and just catch everything live as it happened. And now I don't even have time to catch them on the replays.
Yeah,
So
I remember last time we spoke, you were talking about this new job and how it was probably going to be a bad idea. And I said, you're going to burn yourself out, man. No, I'm guessing you're on your way to happily burning yourself out.
I am. I think we've decided that come December, we're going to drop Tuesdays over there on Truth Frequency Radio. We're doing Tuesdays and Fridays now. So we'll drop Tuesdays and then pick up Mondays and Wednesdays and go 3 days a week over there, I think.
Wow.
This man not only burns the candle at both ends, he takes a flamethrower to it.
Guys, I know I do a maths. I'm the guy that gets thrust to go look at that maths head. But Josh, right?
Yeah.
This is like baller maths. We're going to have to go through here, son. If I know you drop in Tuesdays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're picking up Mondays and Wednesdays.
Exactly. Yes.
That should be a lot easier. Good on you. Good life choice.
Well, it works really well as long as you can map it on a globe with a presupposed radius. Then everything works out perfectly. So I have nothing to worry about.
So you're planning on doing
the sphere going in, right?
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, yeah?
That's the plan. We're going to expand our reach.
Downsizing.
We're getting so much love now that we're just going to blow out.
And I'll either put myself in an early grave or end up adding a 4th day. I don't know.
I'll see a 7-day week show coming. Start your day with Iron Realm.
We've got the master of a 7-day week show with us. Nathan, you do this.
To learn from this guy.
How do you keep it up, pal?
No, just get into a routine of it. It's 12 months to the day tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I've done 12 months solid every single day.
Congratulations, friend. My goodness. That's epic. That is truly epic. My goodness.
12 months daily streaming. But that was kind of what I'd set out to do. So I was like, no, I'm going to do daily streams. That's my ambition. That's what I'll do. I'll stick to it.
How's your blood pressure?
Fine.
Good.
I'm sure it's excellent with all the venting he gets to do on a daily basis. He gets it out. Some of us have to chew it down because we have to be nice on the air.
Cool as a cucumber the rest of the time. I get to shout at globeheads and call them idiots. It's great.
Exactly, right. That has to be satisfying.
That's what I do in my shed. I go away, scream and shout, and then come back and compose a well-reasoned, polite reply. But yeah, I can see the... is it catharsism or something?
Yeah, it is. It's very cathartic.
Yeah. Oh.
Because the best one is when they say, you call them an idiot, and they say, that's an ad hominem attack. You go, no. That's not an ad hominem attack. I've literally pointed out your fallacious argument, and it's idiocy in terms of your reasoning. Therefore, the logical conclusion is that you are an idiot. It's not an ad hominem attack.
And idiot is in the law dictionary, is it not, Riley?
I don't know. I haven't seen my law dictionary for about 15 years. It might be.
Shit,
Better get the bugger out.
That's a total lie. We looked up evidence about 4 times because your memory is absolutely like sick.
Do you know, I can't remember things that happened last week, but I can remember things that happened like 20 years ago. I'm sure there's a condition name.
Welcome to my world, Riley.
Yeah.
Let's have a test of that memory. So what is evidence?
Oh, we're not doing this right now. Come on.
Go on, what is evidence?
I can't remember what the conclusion of it was.
Proof.
So evidence and proof were interchangeable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember us doing that. I don't remember what the conclusion was.
Evidence and proof are synonyms.
That's interesting, and that's from a legal point of view. Is that the same for in a scientific sort of point of view? Do you know?
To be honest, I don't agree with what Nathan's just said.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't what I was taught.
Well, just look it up in the dictionary.
And evidence is a fact, and therefore whether it supports your theory, hypothesis, whichever way it does, it's kind of irrelevant whether it lends support to your argument. If it's evidence, then it should be factually correct. Therefore, it is a proof. A proof is to what is kind of for conjecture, but it's still a proof, isn't it?
There's different levels of evidence, though, aren't there?
That's what I got taught. I got taught that evidence furnishes proof. Proof is the conclusion or the accumulation of evidence, because there are many evidences to a crime, but it doesn't mean that there are many proofs. But the way Nathan found this interpretation, and we did go over it, and I had to agree with him in the end that it was the same word, although I don't really remember doing it, but I do vaguely remember doing it. But I was always told that, for example, if there's only the one crime, right, there's a burglary, right, or there's a robbery, or there's a bank robbery, you will get like 20 different pieces of evidence from, say, 10 pieces of witness statements, and then gunpowder residue, and all these other bits of pieces of evidence, and they all furnished a proof. Overall, the proof was, yeah, he did do it, and the verdict would be based on whatever evidence is, and then it would be deemed proof that he did, because it was all of them combined together. But when Nathan looked it up, and you'll have to tell them, Nathan, I can't remember what the conclusion was, but I do remember it vaguely.
Well, basically, the conclusion is that if you look at some of the other terminology, so most of them have got a prefix, it will describe how it's not evidence, or how it will be dismissed as not being evidence, or how it's not good evidence. And the overriding theme is that when you actually get to the just evidence, just the word evidence on its own, that's when it means it's proving something. And if it's put before a judge for the sake of argument, they'd look at it and then say, no, this is not good evidence. It can be dismissed as evidence because it's not furnishing proof. In other words, if the two are synonyms, proof and evidence. But we're not talking about that. We're talking of something totally different, which is scientific evidence, which is a totally different standard altogether again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We learned quite a lot recently. Well, I mean, the thing that I learned was that, I'm not going to say who, but I learned that there was this thing called a concept, which I didn't realize was actually like, it was so broad that it covers literally everything. And if you describe something as a concept, usually it's because you don't have the tangible evidence to prove that it's tangible or physical or real. So you would describe it conceptually. And I think we all use it in that context. But when you look up the definition of concept, it means literally anything once it's been formed in the mind. So like we can talk about the desk that your PC keyboard sat on. And obviously I can't see your desk, right? I don't know what your desk looks like, but I can imagine what your desk might look like based on how you describe it. So then that becomes a concept of your desk. Even though your desk actually exists and it's real and it's tangible, it's still a concept because it's only in my mind, even though it is a physical object. But obviously that creates a bit of a problem, because if we're describing a tree, you can all imagine what a tree looks like, right? That would be conceptual. You're making this thing called tree in your mind, but you don't know what it actually looks like, because we're talking about one particular tree. So unless that tree gets brought into reality with pictures and evidence to prove that it's a real tree, then you only have a concept of this tree. Yet we all know that trees are real, right? They're not conceptual by their nature. They're tangible. They're real. You can touch them. But it muddies the water, and I described it as raping language when somebody just started to describe stuff that was defined in science or in biology or whatever. When someone starts describing something that's got definition, and in this case it was the word force, I believe, you can't call it a concept just because you don't really like the definition that's being presented to you, because it basically rapes the meaning of language. It removes the finite nature and the precision of the language used when describing force to call it a concept.
They want to say it. Let me say it. It's called a reverse reification fallacy.
Yeah, we've made it up because reification is when you have something that doesn't actually exist and you have to describe it conceptually. So, for example, Arwin would talk about his concept of gravity, and we would realize that, once he disclaims it, that it's a concept, right? But if you're going to call a tree a concept, but we all know that trees exist, then you're reversing what is basically making something into a concept because it's not really there. Well, you're making something that is really there into a concept, but it actually does exist. So we've had to call it the reverse reification fallacy, because one particular guy wants to describe everything as conceptual when there are tangible objects that don't need to be conceptualized, and he does it just because, in my opinion, it rapes the meaning of words. It's bad.
Wow, I actually kept up with you there.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's bad that I was like, look, we have a specific meaning for this word. Why would you want to conceptualize it with a really broad definition that means nothing when we have a precise meaning that means something specific? And the answer appears to be because he wants to be bloody awkward. But that's because I don't know. I don't know whether it was his word of the week or whatever. He's just learnt it. But reification fallacy was my most recent recent discovery, and it seems to apply everywhere in heliocentricity.
It's Marxist, isn't it? As far as I know. I
don't know where it comes from, but I love it.
Yeah. No, I came across it today. In fact,
Nathan, with that, because I'll admit at that one, I watched your show with Quantum. Have you seen that, John? By the way, the one in the week with regards to fallacies. I'm sure if you haven't, you'll enjoy it. But that was the one that I struggled with a bit. So the way I'm getting that one is we talk about a map, as if it's real, and therefore we think that whatever on the map we state is factually correct.
Yeah, it's much easier with
and
science.
Therefore, yeah.
So science says that's the easiest reification fallacy to describe. Science doesn't say anything. It's a methodology. So when people say, well, the current science is this, or the science says that, the body of science this, science feels that. No, science doesn't have feelings. It's not a person. That's a reification. You're making it into a person, something real, something with lips.
I actually think that's a really good example of where one could be lazy, even though it is a reification to say, well, science does say this. When the point's not contentious, I think it's okay to be a bit lazy and say that, because we all know what's meant by it. But when it's important and the point needs to be described with precision, I don't think that you can get away with saying, well, the whole body of science says this on a contentious point, because you can't be lazy when it comes to the meanings of words in contentious matters. And that's what happens with one or two ballers.
Don't you find, Riley, that almost every single debate about the ball, it reverts into a sort of semantics, into the drilling down into the details of words and things like this, where level doesn't mean level anymore. And...
Well, that's where it overlaps with law so much, because how many legal matters come down to the precise meaning of words? Yeah, and ultimately, you can put a negative connotation to the meaning of semantics, but semantics is the opposing word to moot. So you have moot that's not contentious, where you're talking about something, you're debating the merits of a particular point, but it's not contentious. So it's like, it's just for the fun of it, really. You're just trying to distinguish a particular point. You're not going to fall out over it. It's not that big of a deal. That's moot. But obviously contentious, when it is important, it is semantics. It is discussing the minutiae of words, because words do have meaning. And in both law and in science, you've got to have these meanings with some element of precision. Otherwise, you're just going to end up confusing people. And if you use words out of context, I mean, we all do it. We interchange words that might not be precise, but makes the point. We do it when we're amongst friends, and specifically you didn't mean that word, but you compensate for them because it's not that important. So you didn't really mean that word, but it's not contentious. But when it is contentious, these words have meanings, and one of the best examples is the word force. I mean, you can find 10 different meanings for the word force. There isn't one collective meaning for that one word. So you have to work out, well, in this context, what does force actually mean? because you can find it. There's numerous different ways. I mean, there's a mathematical expression, F equals ma. There's a normal science physics explanation, but then you can find another one that's similar but not the same. And you end up like, well, what is the meaning of the word force?
Well,
And
it's the
convoluted.
same. It's the same with the word point. I think that there is no agreed upon definition of the word point, but this is where definitions come into play, isn't it? And why it's so important to agree on definitions before the debate even starts, because otherwise, from my experience, is that people have so many different definitions of what you think is logical and normal, and then you find out 250 tweets later that they don't think up is up or down is down. It's just
Well, PMARS joined the other day and he literally gave a definition of what I thought he was describing was inertia, but he was describing mass. And he came in and he said it's the an object's what is it, the object's resistance to move, or something of that nature. And I was like, that's not mass, that's inertia. And he says, no, it's mass. And I was like, it's not, that's inertia. A body's reluctance to move is inertia. And when we looked it up on Wikipedia, sure enough, he was reading from Wikipedia and what he was describing was mass. And I thought, that's not bloody mass. Mass is how much matter there is in an object, right? That's what I was taught. But now he's got this new concept, this new definition that I've not heard of. And then when we cross-referenced it with what inertia was, the meanings of the definitions were both identical. And we had the whole show on whether or not they were the same or not. And they were the same. And it's like, what the hell does mass mean then? You can't have mass meaning saying one thing, but meaning the opposite as well. You can't have two meanings for the word mass. It's one thing or it's not. But apparently there seems to be two meanings for the word mass.
It's part of the con.
It is. I agree.
Okay, so zetetically, there is no difference. There is no... You can pick whichever word. It's the same thing. Weight and mass, for all intensive purposes, measurably, they are the same thing. We try to pretend mathematically that they're different, but for all purposes of reality, and certainly for my profession, there is no difference whether we're talking moles, kilograms, whatever. It's all the same thing. It never varies. It is static. It's just another wave of the magician's hand.
You can't get away from it either, because the meanings of words is important in language. If you say one thing, it means what you say. It doesn't mean like a similar but different meaning. Because there are words that like you can interchange, but they don't really mean the same thing. And it's sloppy language, but we do it just to make the point, right? But if the point's contentious and then someone says, hang on a minute, I don't actually mean that way, I mean it this way. And then you look at the meanings and you can't get around it. Unfortunately, language is that way that we all interpret these words.
Some of that's done on purpose. Some of that's done on by design, like birth being the day you were born versus birthing a ship and that whole thing with legality and nautical stuff. We're kind of actually talking about that a bit in chat as well with language. So that'll be a whole different show if we get off on spelling and things like that. Let's just keep where it is. My bad.
Yeah, and obviously the more you get into this conversation and you realize that there is a con going on here. I mean, for example, Rumpus came in and he tried to give some mathematical explanation for neutral buoyancy. And mathematics is supposed to be a representation of what, reality, the world in which we see. And his maths didn't match the definition. So I pointed it out because he'd added little g, obviously, and he added m. That wasn't there. It might have been volume. It was either mass or volume he'd added. But basically, the definition of neutral buoyancy was the density of the object relative to the density of the medium it's in. That's all it was. But he'd put in two extra little bits that weren't there in the definition. Maths is supposed to represent reality, but you'd put in these extra little bits that weren't there in the definition. Why would you do that? And basically, he did it because either he was trying to deceive us or he was doing what he was taught. But either way, it didn't match the definition. So when I pointed that out, he said, "Oh, so you're just being a moron." Well, actually, no. These things have meanings, and we've got to kind of work at what these words actually mean, because maths is supposed to be an expression of reality. And if you're putting in different parts to reality that aren't really there, that's a problem. And that's what he was doing.
No, Tony, have you sort of seen what I've been seeing recently of people going away from the word buoyancy and using just simple relative density for both buoyancy and density. Have you seen that?
Relative, yeah, I've been pushing that because the word relative is the key word. Relative density or relative buoyancy is basically the same thing but the opposite. And I'm all right with that so long as the word relative's in it, because if you say it's just density and buoyancy, that's only half of it. That word relative does need to be there, because then you're going to cross-reference it with something else. It's not in isolation.
Yeah. No,
do you
that's
agree?
Cool. Yeah, I do agree. I think relative density is there's no buoyancy. Has always been a difficult one for me. It's always I don't know. It hasn't quite covered what I've been trying to say. I think relative density, as in you're more dense than the surrounding medium or you're less dense than the surrounding medium, is a far more succinct way of putting it, in a less ambiguous way for them to pick holes in it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see it that way, guys. Go on, Nathan.
Say the way they get around that on the heliocentric side of it is to, in the most literal way, suck the relative difference bit out of the equation. So they stick the whole thing in a vacuum chamber, and then there is no relative difference. They just suck the medium out completely, and then you've got no difference between anything.
What were you going to say, Adam?
I see the two things as slightly different. The buoyant force is the expression of what density causes. So it's the buoyancy that is the force that we're describing, and behind that the reasoning is the relative densities. I don't necessarily see them as opposite. I see them more as a synonymous thing of how it works more than.
So long as the word relative's there, I think that's the key bit, because once you put relative there, as long as you understand the concept of relative beings and relative things, then you can't really go wrong, I don't think, once that word's in there.
It's that relativeness that's important. I think that's the word I think we're all waiting for Paul on the Plane and Noxie to bring out, which will show that relativeness. But there was a bit this afternoon, I think I caught on Nathan's show, where you were talking about the effects of dropping items in a vacuum, and it got onto the point I've been pondering for a long time. At that point, the supposed equalization of 9.8 is caused by the air. Normally, in a vacuum, that disappears. Then, therefore, the only supposed downward cause, if we've removed this buoyancy to neutralize any relative densities, is this, if it did exist, this gravitational force. Yet we see this contradiction again, where everything falls at the same rate. So if that's the case, then that to me is a contradiction, that the supposed gravity force is in some way related to mass, because if you do remove any stabilizing outward forces such as atmosphere, then the only forces at play are the mass forces. Therefore, a heavier massed item should have a greater attraction between it and the centre of the Earth.
This is where the rumpus would interrupt straight away and say, mass isn't a force, weight is a force. And obviously, the only difference between the two concepts is G.
Oh, it's to introduce G. The only reason, this is what I say, the two things in reality are the same thing. You try to differentiate it, and they remove the kilograms, multiply it by G, and give you this pseudo unit called a Newton, which is only it's only there to introduce G. It serves no purpose. Once you get to the end of the calculation and you want to work things out, you have to convert back from newtons back into kilograms. You know, so that it makes sense.
Bollock newtons, please.
Bollock newtons. So I'm a fucking amateur. Sorry.
See, there's two responses to when the rumpus says that. Well, actually, there's two responses generally. For everything that goes down, and I say that word loosely, there is an equal and opposite reaction according to Newton's third law, where something else goes back up. Now, it doesn't really matter what that something else going back up is. The fact is that something else goes back up, and it's a balancing act, right? But we always forget about the second half of it because we see the brick going down, but we don't see the same volume of air going back up again. So that's a balancing act, right? For me, that's an equal and opposite reaction, a balancing act. But we only ever focus on the part that we see. But there's another part, according to Newton, that is equal and opposite. By that definition, makes, well, only 50% of the statement's true, in that gravity pulls everything down. Well, if gravity does exist, it also sends something else going back up the other way. So it's like that makes half of the argument immediately. 50% of it's become, well, it's not accurate anymore to say that things go down because there's something else going back up the other way. And the second thing to add to that is that Newton himself in the Principia stated that basically he makes no hypothesis for the force of gravitation. He was unable to prove this force of gravitation in the phenomena that he observes. And when you look at the Latin and it gets translated, you have to kind of give a little bit of leeway for the possibility of inaccurate translation, plus the prose that was used back in the 16th century, 17th century, to as to what he was actually meaning. But what he basically says, I was unable to prove cause for this downwards acceleration force or gravitation force, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't prove it. So he believes it's there, but he kind of like literally not disclaims. But
can I interrupt there and just ask Nathan to make a statement on that? That's quite an important thing you say there, Andy. So we have Newton making. You just read the statement he says again, Nathan, and you evaluate that scientifically.
So he says, hypothesis non fingo, roughly translated, I make no hypothesis. For gravitation, obviously, specifically for gravitation. Hypothesis non fingo.
Well, let me put it into its more easy to understand. It says, but hitherto, I have not been able to discover the cause of those properties of gravity from the phenomena, and I frame no hypothesis. So basically, he's not been able to discover the cause of these properties of gravity. So if you can't prove cause of gravity, right, you're not proving gravity. That's the way I read it. I'm not saying that's the way to read it, but what I'm saying is
that's the way I read it, Anthony, that you've got a clear, concise statement from Newton himself, saying that he has not been able to identify any cause. And I'll hand over to Nation then. What in a scientific experiment statement of any nature, cause is the fundamental principle, surely, mate.
Yeah, the independent variable. So the thing that you must vary and manipulate in order to establish it as a scientific cause, i.e. your experimental stage would validate that you can vary and manipulate as either the cause, or you get your null difference, i.e. it's not the cause, you get zero difference, you validate your null. But yeah, you're trying to vary and manipulate it. We had a guy on the show the other day we took him through the baby steps of literally an apple falling from a tree. It's like, right, there's my effect. There's my observed phenomena. Apple falls from tree. And when you establish with him, well, what is causing that? The answer from Johnny Globehead is gravity. It's like, oh, yeah. Well, how are you going to vary and manipulate gravity? That's why there's no hypothesis for it. You cannot hypothesize this. It's not capable of scientific prediction. And Newton himself disclaims that. He makes no hypothesis. And to say he makes a hypothesis, you have to define what a hypothesis is. Hypothesis is a scientific prediction. So he cannot make a scientific prediction about gravitation. It can't be formulated into a scientific prediction. It's not science. That's the end of the statement. He can't make a hypothesis.
From my research with Newton, he was actually quite scathing about gravity and its capabilities, and he even went to the point of saying that, you know, gravity at a distance, such as planets and things like this, was an absurdity, and he hoped his name was never linked with it. I don't know. We've had those quotes on the show before, but does anyone remember all of that? Because I can't find it, obviously.
Not offhand. I mean, I vaguely remember something about it.
It appears to me, and I don't know enough about Newton to say that this is true, but by that sentence that we just read out, I have not been able to discover the cause of those properties of gravity from phenomena, that tells me that he probably died. They probably raped all his life work and then represented it after his death. Now, I might be wrong, but we've seen that happen before with people upon death. They become famous, especially in science. And you wonder why. Why is it upon death did they become? And it's probably because they've raped the meanings of what their work was.
That's the poignant point of his statement. Okay, so afterwards and for history, his work on gravity is portrayed as scientific evidence. Okay, but we have a clear statement from the man himself stating that he can find no cause.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, as far as I'm aware, cause is the fundamental principle you're trying to find in any scientific experiment. So most fundamentally, he's stating in his own words, not other people's written after him, that as far as the gravitational force, he finds no scientific explanation or validation for it. It's a quite clear statement.
Now, obviously, we would never have come across this unless we'd been like focusing on it so much. And obviously, that focus has really come from Arwin, because he argues gravity better than most of the ballers do. And because he genuinely believes it. I think some of the ballers don't even believe it, and that's why they're not that keen on it. But Arwin argues it vehemently. And by standing his ground, it makes you go a little bit further. And I mean, the further you look into it and the more you realize, actually, it appears that this guy, he probably is turning in his grave right now at the way that people are quoting him, because it appears that if you can't discover the cause of these properties of gravity from phenomena, you're kind of saying that there is no gravity. You're saying something else. But everybody, I tell you something, right? I think the confusion comes from his first law of motion, which states that, and this is probably a misrepresentation as well, to be honest. I'm going to check it to see whether it has been misrepresented. But his first law states that an object will remain at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. But that word force is in that first law of Newton's laws of motion. So the word force, like, is because of the definitions, and you can find numerous definitions, some that support you, some that don't. It's one of those words that seems to have been muddied, and they need this force of gravity. But his first law of motion states that it requires a force. So they've needed to make gravity a force to make this work, or that's actually the misrepresentation. So unfortunately, the rest of his work is like, I tend to agree with most of his work that I've seen so far, but that first law requires a movement to be a force, yet we don't see any force when things move. So not always. I mean, yeah, you can push a car or you can pull a car, but when there's a little happy tomato in a layer of density that's equal to the density of the little happy tomato and it doesn't move, and then you tinker with that little layer, that medium that the tomato's in, and then you can make it move up, then that's not actually a force. So you need to make that a force for it to be gravity, but the definition of force doesn't support it because it needs to have an interaction, a push or a pull. Well, there's nothing interacting with it. It's like,
I think this has been hyperbole far too much, because you've made it complicated after the bit that you needed to stop at, which is their argument falls apart when it gets neutrally buoyant. At the point that everything is at zero, at that point, when you look at the mathematics, you see that all of these little g's that have been interacting with the maths unnecessarily don't do anything.
They cancel out.
Yeah,
they cancel out.
The point, they don't cancel out, and this is the point mathematically. What they try to pretend is they cancel out. Now, the bit I see is that in their world, you've got gravity pulling down, and they try to pretend that you've got buoyancy pushing up. They're opposing forces. Now, that would be fine. So what you would have is a container in water would go so far up and sit so far in the water based on the opposition of the buoyancy upwards, I'm trying to stay American, and the gravity pulling down. When you have neutral buoyancy, there is no upward force. Okay, it's neutral. So there is no opposing force, as the Rumpus would describe. There is nothing pushing it up. They're the same density. There is no force in action. So therefore, logically, conversely, there can't be any negative force the other way. There's nothing to be negative against. Forget their need for them to try and oppose these forces. There isn't a force to oppose in the first place because it's neutrally buoyant. They're the same. There is no buoyancy force in action.
Yeah, they gave this tug of war scenario where they said, yeah, you got two blokes either side pulling the rope in the middle, but in this little cherry tomato that's not moving, there's no rope, so you got to argue that there's a force there, right? But you can't. There's no force, so how are you going to argue for a force that doesn't actually exist? You can't prove it. There isn't one. Nobody would say there is one.
Just while we're still on Newton, though, could it be the case that that's perhaps where Newton was one step ahead of the people that ended up utilizing his work? You know, a bit like Brahe saying, well, they'd have to be enormous. You know what I mean? It's a bit like that.
Possibly. But it begs the question, well, has all of his work been undermined by virtue of his death? Because this would never have been able to happen during his life. So was it because he died and then they've twisted it all?
To stay in theme, I would describe it as historical quote mining, Nathan.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say that if the history of Newton and his background and everything is to be believed, then he was a very connected member, should I say. And I think it was back in a day where it was under such scrutiny, things like what he published, that he didn't have the gall to say, look, this is a fact, this is real, he had to start his book off with the word if, and say he had nothing to do with gravity if it was gravity at a distance and all this sort of stuff. Same as Copernicus, wasn't it? His book didn't get published till he died, and then it was backed by the Vatican. Correct. And everything. But I think still Copernicus and Newton were very connected people in the world of whatever you want to call it.
Copernicus jailed? Wasn't he jailed for his shifting of the whole thing around? I mean, until
that's the point.
Actually died, right? That's
yeah,
what I thought. I remember.
All of these stories where we rewrite the words of historical figures and their findings. All of these stories come with apologetics, in terms of they didn't utter it because of the Spanish, because of the Catholic Church, this, that, and the other. There's always a reason why, even though in this case Newton's words are quite clear if you read the man's words, that actually no, he didn't mean that, to support the direction, the narrative they wish. This is...
The other part of this is this game didn't just begin with us waking up to flat Earth. I mean, there have been people, I'm sure, awake, seeing what's going on around them throughout history, who came forward and tried to show people what the hell was really going on, and were just as controlled and just as, has much disinformation and everything else heaped onto their real work they may have been trying to do. I'm not giving anybody apologetics here. I'm just saying there's as much control of this information back then as there is what we see daily here,
Well, but they can skew the narrative. So what they did with Newton in terms of gravity was, whenever we talk about it, we always talk about it as Newtonian Cavendish gravity, because there's the distinction between that and Einsteinian, which isn't necessarily what I want to talk about tonight. But you've got this introduction of a quasi-scientific experiment, which is a seriously loaded term in the debate, because it's not an experiment, it's not scientific, but it's punted as such because it's a contraption that does something. And I don't know honestly how long you guys have been around in flat Earth, but when I first came to it, the Cavendish experiment was being exposed to this community, or flat Earth community, as the joke that it is.
I remember John Le Bon did a video ridiculing it in the early days, and he's not even a flat earther. So there you go.
Well, remember the video someone used with the I think it was a Spanish maybe comedian on some show, and they overdubbed it with all the Cavendish stuff, and it was hilarious. Yeah,
that was John Le Bon. So that got mirrored by.
That was his. Okay, I didn't know that was his. My bad.
Yeah, that was John Le Bon that did that. But yeah, there was only a handful of people that were covering it. So there was Fake Spaceman in Space who'd got hold of this professor who had explained that one of his students had got hold of this quite small piece of equipment that had the Cavendish set up in it in a little sealed environment, and eventually explained that the student that got so frustrated with it, he'd hacked it to pieces with a saw because he couldn't get it to work. And that was kind of the narrative at the time, that Cavendish didn't work. Since then, things have evolved, and you've got people that are literally putting this parlor trick together in their bedroom and you know, manipulating it with various bits of polystyrene and air currents.
Yeah, right.
We've
Shout out to
actually
Slice Marketing.
we've played that clip on the show before. It's the
Yeah,
professor from Nottingham, isn't it, Adam?
That's fun.
6 million ways or something they're called.
Oh God, what 60?
60 million something or other. Yeah.
It's
No,
the
they're
Nottingham
brilliant.
University Physics Department, and they go through all sorts of good kind of physics stuff, and but even he, as he's describing gravity, kind of admits, and it's something I would testify to, that, you know, when I did it, I did A-level physics for a year and I dropped it for psychology instead. But one of the basics you always do there was the dropping the balls and measuring the time, and then the Cavendish experiment. And the physics teacher said, "Look, don't worry, it won't work. You know, it never does. You know, it's not something that is an experiment that's replicable." And by that definition, he didn't say it's not an experiment. He said it's just you just don't replicate it. But by that definition, it is not an experiment. And outside of how Nathan can rip it a new one, you know, from within its structure. But
do you remember the video he did on the Foucault pendulum, where he just had a complete brain fart at the end, and it was like he'd hit a brick wall of, this is bullshit. Do you remember that? We played it on the show as well.
Not seen that.
Oh, I might have to line that up for later. It's hilarious.
I can picture it.
I always have a problem with the Foucault pendulum, right? Because they say it's not attached, but it's attached to the Earth.
Yeah,
it's attached to the hook at the top, which is attached to something to the ground.
It's attached to a frame of reference, yeah.
But its frame of reference stays with the Earth. So whatever you're seeing, even if the Earth was rotating, wouldn't it be relevant, because it is attached to the hook at the top.
Well, they would say that the swing is going through a free reference frame, wouldn't they? But, you know, in other words, it's on a pivot point, and that makes it independent of the frame of reference that it's attached to. But
that frame of reference that it's attached to and then supposedly being out there is then the thing that would then apply an extra force to it, as that then rotated onto it. That would rotate upon the pendulum itself, which would then cause an additional force outside of the free rotation of the Earth underneath it. That's my point. It's impossible for that pendulum, once the Earth starts rotating, the two are connected at the top, so a shear force would be applied at the top.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to be a geek.
Both ways, because if the explanation of the Foucault pendulum stands, so let's put my globe head hat on and say, right, it does prove that the Earth rotates underneath that swinging pendulum because it is in its own frame of reference and the Earth turns underneath. That's why you get it moving the way it does. Yep. You go, okay, so we have the Earth turning underneath the atmosphere. Yes, that's how it works. Right. So why don't the flights take different times in east to west, west to east then? In other words, it's the best debunking ever, because that in its nature is designed to prove that you have separate reference frames. Well, if you've got separate reference frames and the Earth rotates underneath the pendulum, well then obviously the Earth's going to turn underneath a plane that's definitely not attached to the Earth by a bloody hook. So yeah, the planes have got the Earth turning underneath them too, right? Oh no, it doesn't work like that for the planes. Oh, why would that be? Yeah, because it's all bollocks.
Well, George Netanyahu's point on that is that he thinks that the Earth's atmosphere goes round with the Earth, but that needs the Earth's atmosphere to be a friction material with the Earth spinning, and the atmosphere is not a friction material. So that's complete nonsense. But that's what his argument is, and it's like it's completely disingenuous.
Well, that leaves the pendulum screwed then, doesn't it? Because if the atmosphere is as one with the Earth, then how are you getting the pendulum moving? Why would it move? They are as one, the atmosphere and the Earth turning together, aren't they? So how would you have any deviation in the pendulum? You wouldn't. So they're screwed both ways with the pendulum. So the pendulum doesn't often come up on the debates. I've got to be honest. We get a lot more Cavendish balls than we do for called pendulum.
It's died almost as much
an,
as...
Doesn't this guy look like an older version of Walt? He does.
So can I just quickly play this, because this is the guy we're talking about.
Give me 1 second, John, and I'll just get a screen up to present.
No worries. Can you see my screen?
Dad, I had no idea.
Yeah, it does look like an older version of you, Walt.
Walt, I don't think it looks anything like you. What is his name anyway? It's
it'd be great if his first name was Walter.
Nah, it's Professor something or other. 60symbols.com is the website. Some of their stuff's fantastic, and this guy, brilliant. I think he's struggling with his own internal brain
Bullshit
meshing.
meter, right?
Something's going on there. It's just hilarious. Adam?
Yeah, I'm good to go whenever you are, sir.
Okay.
Are you
Tell me
sharing
if you can
sounds?
hear it.
Under our feet,
Yeah.
very slowly, and you can't notice it. And why it was such a sensation, Foucault demonstrated to people that they could actually observe the rotation of the Earth.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought that was dead clever of Foucault. I mean, it's something I wouldn't have thought of. And whenever I try and think about it, you have to have this idea that there are stars out there which give you a reference frame, and the pendulum keeps in a straight line with respect to the stars. But even that's not good enough. I talk to my friends and say, all these stars and galaxies are moving around. And then they say, well, when we're put in a corner, the astronomers say, there's the cosmic background radiation. And if you're in the right reference frame, that is isotropic in all directions. But I just like the simple-minded explanation.
None of this makes sense.
It's a complete load of bollocks. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
That is based. That's polite academic for actually. If you think about it, it's a sack of shit.
Yeah.
Well, while we're sharing things, I'm tempted to throw this in the mix, but I see now it's a 20-minute video. Let me just ask everybody here. I gave it to our chat on Twitter earlier. Have you, Nathan, or have you, Anthony, seen Tesla 2.0's video about densenalate? I can't say the word. Let me go back. Deceleration and another word he's created. Some kind of new vocabulation.
Vocabulation.
Gravity is a hoax,
Do you know,
is the name of it. And
you
there's
get
a
the
lot
award
of...
Walt, you get the award for the least credible referencing of a video ever. I have no idea what you're talking
I know it's called Gravity is a Hoax. It's Tesla 2.0, and he's created these two new terms, and I'm trying to find them in the video because it's all textual. Okay, it's deceleration and densibrium. There are two words. Yes. And
No,
it's in
I haven't
reference
seen
to
it, no.
all. It's in reference to all of the things we're discussing, but it's a video I haven't fully grasped yet because of my lack of abilities with math at times. But there's lots of Cavendish in it. There's lots of density. There's lots of force and mass, and you guys would probably enjoy it a lot more than I'm enjoying it.
Stick it in the side chat and
I
let's
will
consider it
definitely
later.
throw it for you for later. But with this idea of just the different viscosities and I see relative density, I see relative acceleration, I see all kind of things in here that definitely fits in, but it's a 20-minute video and a lot of reading involved. And I know everybody has a different frame of reference when it comes to reading sometimes. So if you guys want to sit and read it for 20 minutes, we can. It would just be a long time for sure.
No, don't do 20 minutes on a video. 2 or 3 minutes is okay, but 20 minutes is a lot.
That's what I thought. Exactly. I'll drop it in our chat here in Skype for everybody. I'll drop it in the other chat too for everyone later. Not now though. I don't want you watching it now. I want you watching us.
Yeah.
I know Walt's excited about that vid. I've had a look at it, and it
Yeah,
does
it's really,
look.
it's really intriguing. I like when someone goes this far out with things. As far as, I mean, he's really dug into it. And I saw John, and I mean, John said Tesla, Apple, and he were having a bit of a go on this earlier. I just haven't had time to fully grasp it, as I said. I'll throw it in here for you guys, though, for sure.
Nah, that was something else. But yeah, bang it in the description because you pointed me to it minutes before we started up here.
That's when I found it. So, and as I was kind of clicking and reading
cool.
some of the things as you were saying them, they're in this.
I think he's a professor, PhD, etc., etc.
Yeah, he knows his stuff without a doubt.
But definitely something to look at. Where were we anyway? I've got that other Cavendish experiment lined up with the 60 symbols, but I can't find the bit where he's talking about his teaching assistant hacksawing it up because he got so frustrated with it. If anyone remembers whereabouts that is on the video, because that is absolutely hilarious and it just sums up the Cavendish like a treat.
Well, open the transcript and search for the word frustrated.
Oh, that's way beyond my capabilities. What transcript?
You just did YouTube like hack next level stuff. What happened?
Underneath the video where it's got the thumbs up and the thumbs down.
Yeah.
There's like an extended menu that's like next to the words save. It's like 3 dots.
All right, open transcript. All right, gotcha.
And then click into the transcript window that opens up to make it the active window. Control and F, and then that'll bring up a search box. And then just type in the word frustrated and see if it's mentioned, because that should take you straight to it.
That's awesome.
You lost me at the bit before Control F, but.
So
just click into the window to make it the active window. When
I should share my screen, shouldn't I? That would
go on.
Probably be quite helpful. Let's do that. Right, so I've got the transcript open.
Yeah. So just click in the transcript window to make it active, and then Control and F.
Okay. And then what?
And then type in frustrated.
I can't remember if that's the word he used.
Well, it's probably going to be, there you go. You couldn't have got so frustrated in the, so that is that it there?
I don't know.
It is. Got so frustrated. That'll be it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Let me know if you can hear.
So just go back 10 seconds.
Okay. Where are we on? 419.
So just see at the top it says 411 set of dead balls. Click that line, that top line.
There we go. 410.
No,
can you hear that?
Dead balls inside there. This experiment really is very difficult.
Can you hear that or not?
Yeah.
That's the one we did.
A technician has sawed it apart.
There he says it.
Because he
There.
got so frustrated. And then right in the middle, there's a bit of balls inside there. This experiment really is very difficult to get to work, and a technician has sawed it apart. So because he got so frustrated. And then right in the middle, there's a bit of
But Sly Sparkane got it done in his bedroom, didn't he? Bless him.
Oh, yeah.
Do it again, John.
Styrene. Oh,
Yeah.
John, you can just do it by selecting the line in the transcript there. Just go back to 418.
418 here.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's a bit too far ahead, that. Go back a little bit further.
Hold
Go
on.
there, 411. Yeah, go from there.
Set of dead balls inside there.
Yeah, go on, click.
another set of dead balls inside there. This experiment really is very difficult to get to work, and a technician has sawed it apart so because he got so frustrated. And then right in the middle, there's a bit of glass. There's a mirror which should be suspended from a torsion wire.
It's just hilarious. This is one of his favourite experiments as well. But I think this guy's great.
Even though he can't get it to work.
No one can, apart from Sly.
I like that phrase actually, guys. Get it to work.
Yeah.
Shouldn't really have to get
Make it comply with my desired outcome.
Oh, sorry.
Recently came to the end.
You get me? That's just shocking science. It's very, very difficult to get it to come out with my desired outcome, is what he's saying there.
Just send them round to Slice Arcanes. You'll just pop out the styrene boards and it'll work.
Bit of static always gets it moving, doesn't it?
We got to give this guy a shout out. What was his name? Professor Knowles or something. I'm trying to look on his website. Come on, he's. You have lunch with him, don't you, Adam?
I've not met that. They're a different school. Aaron.
Yeah. Well, when I find his name, I'll give him a shout out. But yeah, top quality bloke.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good education. A lot of ballers could do with watching it.
Okay.
Especially Sly.
Joking aside, the problem is that they're describing it, because it's fallacious, as science. So if you read about that Cavendish experiment, go and look it up, and it will use scientific terms in the description of it. It'll be describing it in the context of science. And science is a really narrow term, as we've discussed. It's trying to establish the cause. So it's essentially just dealing with cause and effect relationships. Science is really narrow. But because it's hypothesis driven, you can validate, prove your hypothesis correct. Yes, there's a caveat. You have to do systematic experimentation, a term that gets hijacked all the time when people say, well, I've repeated my observation, and then they try and dress that up in some sort of science. And it's like, just repeating an observation doesn't mean anything. You know, in literal terms, if you observe something, you can close your eyes, open them again, and voila, observation repeated. It's amazing. But that doesn't give it scientific validity. But that bit's been hijacked from science as well. Anyway, I'll get to my point. Otherwise, I'll monologue forever. The point is that we're ripping this a new one. I mean, we're absolutely ripping Cavendish a new one, because you can take it to pieces based on its non-adherence to the scientific method. The fact that it does not establish a cause. The fact that Newton himself has said he makes no hypothesis for gravitation. You can't turn it into science. But when it gets dressed up as science by the lying religious zealots that we have on the globe-believing side of this argument, you end up with someone like me calling it pseudoscience, which is what it is. Pseudoscience being when you try and present something that is non-scientific, like an observation, as being science. And that's what flat earthers will eventually become guilty of. They'll be accused of being pseudoscientists because they're saying, this is my experiment. And they'll go, okay, well, what's your hypothesis? Oh, well, I can't actually formulate this into a hypothesis, but that's okay, because science can be anything I like it to be. And it's like, well, no, you'll just get called a pseudoscientist eventually, because that's what it is.
Nathan, on that,
Adam,
mate. Yeah.
Doesn't this fit in?
Yeah, I was going to say, on that, right, guys, Mr. Savage is kindly offered this evening, and maybe we should go for a gravity break before we come back and do this, but John's kindly offered to stick his neck on the block and kind of demonstrate that his gyroscope experiment, to say it proves the Earth doesn't rotate, is pseudoscience. And we spent a long time in the week, didn't we, John, discussing what's science, what's pseudoscience, what's dietetic and the likes. And well, I think there was a good understanding there of the importance, and it comes back to Nathan's statement, which I think is probably worth a read when we come back as well, that we need to validate what we're saying in the terms and the certainties in which we're giving it. And I thought it was cool the way you grasped it after a couple of bits of head banging. You grasped the difference and why it doesn't matter, but actually it's kind of what the ballers are doing all along, which is as Nathan says, turning pseudoscience and turning observational stuff and trying to purport it into science, which makes it pseudoscience. But ramble, sorry.
Yeah, you carry on rambling.
No, I'm done now, pal.
No, well, I'm sort of at a disadvantage because I haven't been listening to Nathan. I don't know what you're talking about, Adam, as per natural now. But I had some sort of fling on Wednesday. I don't think
you've forgotten it again, haven't you?
Yeah, of course. I don't. That's why I recorded it. I don't think I put my head on a chopping block or anything, but I do remember Adam saying, "We'll hold that thought and repeat that on Friday because Nathan's gonna love it," or something along those lines. So when we get back after the break, I won't beat around the bush. We'll play what we recorded on Wednesday. We all
Go
Had
to
a-
the tapes. Go to the tapes.
had a
We have
couple
the
of beers.
telemetry.
Are we going to go
I'll
VT?
I'll miss the bit where Zach was snorting coke, and we'll move
With all
straight
the
on.
hookers, damn it.
Or should I include that bit? I don't know. It's up to you whether you want 5
I
minutes
was
or 4
blowing on
minutes.
fire. Come on.
Cut out, cut out the hookers, and it'll be fine.
Okay, all right. So you take it away whenever you want, Josh, and we'll have that ready when we get back.
Gosh,
It's a lot easier than me trying to remember it.
if I could ask all you guys to mute then, and then I'll hand over to Josh. Hey, off you go, Josh. I'm gone.
Shit, I was gonna mute too. Where's my cricket sounds?
Feel free to mute, mate.
No, I'm just gonna go ahead and
4
jump right.
minutes. It's all right.
This is really cool. Yeah, it's only about 4 minutes. I think that's right. I'm not gonna play anything afterwards, so we can just jump right back into it. But this is a little bit of Cheyenne and her song "Gravity."
We're up pretty high, our heads are almost in the clouds, and their feet are chained to the ground with their chains of misery. They've got a hold of me, they won't let go of me. Let go of me. They might have gravity on their side, but something's pulling us high. Got the potential to fly. Don't let them be what holds you back from this one incredible chance. They're lucky to have had a glance at you. While you defy gravity, they can be cruel and mean and a huge pain. Our heads are in the clouds now. Don't let them make it rain. A smile can be the sign they're missing out on their rainy day. They might have gravity on their side, but something's pulling us high. Got the potential to fly. Don't let them be what holds you back from this one incredible chance. They're lucky to have had a glance at you while you defy gravity. You defy gravity. They say we aren't strong enough. We don't have what it takes. I say yeah, they're wrong enough, and we'll show them someday. They might have gravity on their side, but something's pulling us high. Got the potential to fly. Oh yeah, don't let them be what holds you back from this one incredible chance. They're lucky to have had a glance at you while you defy gravity. You defy gravity.
Haha, it's not going to replay because I turned it off.
Man, damn it.
I caught it.
The more I hear that song, the more I love it.
I get chills every time I scream along.
I'm the opposite.
Miserable.
You would
I tell you what,
Arwen
Also
doesn't like
set-
the song either.
Owen doesn't like the song. Gone off him now.
Yeah, I didn't care for it at first, but the more I hear it, it's just the words and her voice. She's amazing. Oh, was she 14 when she did that?
Yeah, 14.
Wow.
Damn it. I'm trying to find a good recipe for somebody in chat for golden milk, and all the ones I'm finding have become really complicated. The one I remember was very simple. Does anyone have a handy one they know offhand? Ratios is what I'm looking for.
Just give the ingredients. Well,
Yeah, I'm going to drop it on.
cumin, honey. What is it?
I know, but they've added all kind of like ginger and add coconut oil and beans and all this crazy stuff. I don't see a simple one anywhere. They're all complicated now. I'll give them one. Hang on.
Did we remain in contact with Tony and Nathan and
Yeah, we're still here.
good stuff? Just checking. Yeah,
Welcome
this
back,
is the
everybody.
Iron
By
Realm,
the
mate.
way, this is right. One click away from perfection.
It's
Adam,
not uncommon to lose guests in the break.
it's nothing is uncommon on Iron Realm, basically.
I accidentally dropped out the call, if that's what you're referring to.
No, I'm just checking
Right.
in.
Well, we had
Just
lost. I saw we lost Zach for a minute, but it looks
Adam's
like it was
there, I think.
Hey,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
hang
all
on.
good. We're all back.
We're all here. I think. We made it
Lovely,
back.
So-
lovely.
Fill me in. What before the break? You said you'd made a pre-record. I have no idea what you're talking about. Obviously, you guys
No,
all.
not a pre-record. It's I've got a terrible habit of not remembering what I said 20 minutes ago, but I can remember what I said 20 years ago. I think Tony had that problem as well. He was describing. So I record our hangouts and stuff before. We've got a pre-show hangout on Wednesdays, and most of the time I record it so I can listen back to it the next day and remember what the hell we were talking about. So during these pre-show hangouts, generally they are dynamite and they're better than our shows, which is quite annoying because no one gets to hear them. But yeah, it's I went off on some rant or whatever, and it's late at night and all that sort of stuff, Nathan, so it's just easier to play it than it is to try and recreate that rant. That
I
makes
see.
sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I might as well play it as we're knocking on that.
Now let's describe
Rant
it.
away.
This would be a spot for that. Yes.
Say again, Josh.
I said let's describe it some more.
Okay, you go for it. You were there.
You're right. It's better just to play it.
You're almost English in your sarcasm. That's quality. That is.
That was good.
Okay, everyone listening, everyone can hear. Let me know.
We've got
Right, Josh. It is long overdue, and unless people are habitual watchers of Nathan Oakley, most people don't get it.
No.
And that's what I see in a lot of the new flat earthers and a lot of the ballers out there, is the fact they just don't get this very simple concept.
No.
And that's why I boil it down to it being just a philosophical point of view, whether it's round or flat, because when it comes down to it, that's basically what it's going to have to be. It's all how you're going to see how you view the world. It's your whole philosophy. You can have a baller philosophy. It works. You can make it work. Fine, whatever. But it doesn't make it reality. And there's just no way to scientifically prove that it's a ball. And that's what, once you can learn to articulate that, basically in any setting, at any argument, that there's really nothing a baller is going to be able to come at you with that's going to have any merit. And that's where Nathan Oakley sits in his laurels and just swats them away, because they all come out there trying to be scientific, thinking they're going to scientifically prove that it's a ball. And that's why he does what he does with such ease, because it's an argument that he's designed to be able to win at every juncture. It's why his housekeeping is designed the way it's designed, so that the only real answers are going to be the ones that they give.
It's unwinnable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
This
this
is
is
a
what I
little
was
bit
going to
more
say, Adam. Hold on. This is what I was going to say, and maybe make a note. It's akin to Einstein and his carriage going down the road, and okay, to everyone who is normal, sane, and have 2 neurons to rub together rather than 2 billion neurons, him saying that his example was, a guy falls over on the street. It's equally as logical to say that the street jumped up and smacked him in the face rather than him falling over. Like in a cart, you're driving down the road in a cart, it's equally as logical to say that the street and the road and everything around you is moving in the other direction and you're standing still. This is how ludicrous and ridiculous I find what we can describe zetetically, what we're calling zetetically, and what seems to be rejected as scientific, because we don't have a street to move, or a pavement to slap you in the face, or an earth to spin to show that it's not spinning. Do you see what I mean? I'm almost at the point where I don't give a fuck about scientific anything. I'll stick with zetetic, because that's what your common sense, logic, and absolute rational reason tells you is what's going on. If you can show that you can get a gyroscope and nothing is happening to it, then you can logically conclude that what that gyroscope is attached to is not moving and no forces are being applied to it. If you can then go on to say, well, that's bollocks because you haven't got an earth that's turning in order to show that it would work or wouldn't work, then and until you do that, I can't call it scientific. That's fine. Don't call it scientific. I'm not interested in your scientific anything anymore. I'm more interested in zetetic common sense.
Right. Save that fucking rant for Friday, right? And I'll tell you why, because I think you'll make Nathan cry.
That was epic. That was absolutely beautifully put. There's nothing wrong with the observably bloody obvious, and gyroscopes fall into that category. You don't need to call it science. There's absolutely no necessity whatsoever. And that's to our advantage, because we've got the truth on our side. We don't have some obscure phenomenon to try and validate. When we're seeing buildings in the distance, it's very static. You see it because it's there. However, they turn it into an observed phenomena. Now, they can't easily reverse that onto us, which is how it seems to come across when I'm batting it away with the globe heads, because they're using lies and trying to validate them by calling them science. And we've got no need to. It's bloody obvious. Like you say, your gyroscope hasn't moved an inch. The cradle hasn't spun around this fixed spinning thing. Nothing has changed. It's obvious what's going on. That doesn't need a scientific validation. There's no cause and effect reasoning required to state the bloody obvious. And that I like that, Rank, because I can almost hear it in your voice that you're kind of annoyed about the fact that you can't call it science. And it's like, well, it's not just science then. Well, yeah, absolutely right on. We don't need science. It's bloody obvious that the Earth's flat. Don't need to science the shit out of anything. They do, because they've got nothing but lies. And in the process of realizing that establishing cause and effect proves something, they've hijacked it, like they hijacked perspective with the calculator. They've hijacked the meaning of the word and diluted it right down. So earlier on in your education, you vaguely remember that science proves things. Then almost immediately into your adult life, when you start getting into definitions, oh, well, no, science doesn't prove things. Well, yeah, it does. You go through your systematic experimentation stage to validate your cause. Well, there's no cause involved with your gyroscope. It's not an experiment, but you don't need to dress it up as one. They do when they talk about Cavendish, because it's not proving a damn thing. But if you call it science, suddenly layman thinks, well, that's obviously science. Look at it. It's a contraption. And they say it's science. And I vaguely remember something about that proving things. Well, we don't need that. It's obviously and observably flat. And every instrumentation that you ever get that's referencing the very nature of our flat plane we dwell atop, it will tell you exactly that. Don't need science for that. Just say, look, obviously, if you can extrapolate, if it was a ball, it would be moving. It's not. You don't need to suddenly have the ability to manipulate that variable. The shape of the Earth falls outside of the remit of science. You can't vary and manipulate the shape of the Earth. You can't turn a flat plane into a curved Earth just to validate your cause and effect reasoning with a gyroscope. But you don't need to. Bloody obvious, it's flat.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate that.
I like that rant. That was epic, because you're absolutely spot on. Even through, I can hear the frustration in your voice, because presumably you've been calling these things experiments. And here's me saying, it's not an experiment. How dare you use that term? Spit, spit. And you're like, well, no, this is proving something. Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with logical deduction. And you put it even better than I could.
Well, yeah, it was several cases of people throwing it back at me saying, what's your variable? I don't even know the jargon, to be perfectly honest. Help me out.
Yeah, what's your independent variable?
Independent variable, and your
cause.
That's right.
You're trying to establish the cause of what? Nothing's happening, right?
Well, it then sort of snowballed on to finally sort of saying, well, you're going to need a stationary flat Earth and you're going to need a spinning spherical Earth in order to prove
John,
what you're talking about.
It kind of where the conversation started tonight. It's not necessarily directly semantics, but we kind of got it to the point where we understood it can be classed as an experiment in some ways if set up and viewed hypothetically, but in the sense of it in relation to the Earth spinning, it could not be called a scientific experiment, because for it to do so, got to, wasn't it? We had to vary the spin of the Earth, and that's what would be requirement of the experiment to demonstrate in the experiment. Have to vary the spin of the Earth to prove it scientifically.
Well, I think we settled on zetetic experiment or something by the end of it, which was inquiring by experimentation sort of thing.
Yeah, the bit I want to get to is that doesn't mean that the experiments, like experiment 2, where you set up a scientific experiment where you measured whether an applied force at a slow rate would affect change on the gyroscope.
Now stop you.
Oh, come on! I knew it. Come on, Dave. I know what it is. Yeah, go on.
What's an experiment? Yeah, this is semantics, but it's important because this is where this is seminal, if you ask me, because in John's actions, he's essentially accepting the fact that if you can describe it in a zetetic fashion as opposed to a scientific fashion, then you've only got people to observe the obvious, right? When you frame it in the context of science, some clever dick will come along and say, well, how are you going to vary your independent variable? If you're going to say the cause of this is it's flat, cause is established with science, and your cause, independent variable, the thing you'll vary, is the flatness of the Earth, something that is impossible to vary. Well, that's how we get the globe heads when they say, this is science. I'm going to go out and measure the horizon with the theodolite. Oh, yeah, science, you say? Wonderful. How are you going to vary and manipulate the independent variable? So we get them by the balls on this day in, day out, but we don't need to fall victim to the same trap when some clever dick globehead says, what's your independent variable for your gyroscope experiment? If you just
Exactly.
did the word experiment, and this is the reason, the semantics, is that an experiment is a hypothesis test. And a hypothesis is a scientific prediction. So as soon as you say experiment, it automatically frames it in science. And it means you're going to be testing your scientific prediction. So it is ipso facto a scientific term. As soon as you say experiment, you mean you're going to be testing your hypothesis. And your hypothesis is something that's going to establish your cause and effect. So you're screwed as soon as you say that word. Even if you say test, if you're talking in a context of science and you say test, that automatically means experiment.
Oh,
Right,
man.
Nate,
Don't
Nate.
take away my test.
No,
Well,
let's get to tests in a
this is-
minute because I wanna just test Nathan, if that's all right, or test me.
Well, I've got
Okay,
one more
so-
sentence.
Yeah,
one
go
more
on.
sentence,
Go on.
and I'll let you go ahead. So the word test is ambiguous in the respect that it has many meanings, but it's all about the context. If you're trying to sound scientific, in other words, the way you're describing something is to come across as though it is science, and you say test, that frames it immediately as a hypothesis test because you're talking scientifically. Now, you can obviously have maths tests. You know, you can have a test of one's intelligence. You can have all sorts of different tests. It's all about the framework that you're talking within. So if you're trying to say that I'm scientifically validating what shape the land we dwell atop is, then you say I'm going to do a test, you're screwed immediately.
I know you're talking absolute accuracy, but I'm running out of words, mate.
Yeah, it's a bugger, isn't it? It's always 9 times out of 10 an observation. So that's the simplest thing. And that's why I like the terminology. It is obviously and observably flat. In other words, you know, you can make your extrapolations of what it's not doing, but you're not having to scientifically validate that as the contrary in a hypothesis test. So you can say, well, my gyroscope doesn't do anything. It's not moving an inch. The plane's gyroscopes, when they get to their destination, they may cage them, but they don't need to. They've not moved. You know, they're on exactly the same reference as when they took off. Well, them not doing anything is because they're not doing anything, you know, because it's not a bloody sphere. If it was, then they'd do something. Now, that logical deduction is perfectly acceptable.
Sweet.
Sorry,
think-
go ahead. I'm almost.
No,
show.
no, dude. Moving on. I mean, the point you made there is it's okay to observe something, and the only point I'd say with regards to that is that, you know, that is the observation of a phenomenon. Sorry, Zach. Is the foundations of science. It's the beginnings. Now, whether or not we can then go on to prove a hypothesis for that observation scientifically is a very difficult thing to do.
Oh, stop you again. I'm really sorry, Adam.
Go
You're
on.
going to hate me at the end of this.
No, it's good. It's good,
Well, you're
mate.
falling-
I've got no
you're falling-
problem with being
See?
wrong, bruv. I'm
Well,
not saying I am yet.
So, Anthony, I'm going to use you instead of Adam. Sorry, I'm going to pick on you because Adam's had one bullet.
Do it. I'm a bit I'm airy
My
enough,
laugh.
mate.
Hang on a minute. I haven't said anything. I've been deliberately keeping quiet
Stop
here.
You're in the line of fire. It's already happened. Deal
Yeah,
with it.
pick on him.
So
Sorry.
what Anthony does is he looks at his observation. So he takes a picture of a lighthouse that's 31 miles away. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't know why I can see the lighthouse. And I want to throttle him. What do you mean you don't know why you can see it? You can see it. I don't have to ever explain. I've got my, you know, I'm not going to turn my camera on, but I'm holding my keyboard, right? And I close my eyes for a second, I open my eyes, and there's my keyboard. Now, do I need to say, like Anthony
No,
does,
okay, so you just
"I don't
sewing,
know
yeah.
why I see my keyboard? Let's science this immediately." No, I just see it because it's in front of me and it's there. I've opened my eyes and I see it. It's there. It's a concrete noun. There it is. I see it.
Yeah.
The same exact thing applies to the lighthouse. You open your eyes, you see it. It's there. No explanation whatsoever required. So when Anthony says, I don't know why I see it, Well, that's because you're trained to think that it's an observed phenomena. Just seeing something suddenly becomes something that's a phenomenon. Well, it's not. Just seeing something is not a phenomena. There it is. You see it. It's there. End of explanation. None required. No science needed. There it is. So the same is true for a lot of observations, including the gyroscope. It's obviously not moving. It's observably not doing anything. It's just giving you the same reference every single time. Well, that doesn't need any science. Observably bloody obvious.
Well, the reason why I actually don't say, the reason why I say I don't know why I can see it, is then I can't be accused of making an assertion that I can't, validate or prove. So if you say nothing, then it means that you're not going to get into trouble.
Photograph. How much more validation do you need? There it is.
I think the point I'd make there is it requires, when you look at that gyroscope, if you don't have the science for the understanding and the scientific understanding of what you're looking at as a gyroscope, which has to be validated and proven scientifically, then that obvious thing isn't anything necessarily obvious. So the point I was kind of making is that these things, both scientific validation of one thing, which can make another thing bloody obvious, work hand in hand. The skill is to, or the key is to ensure that when you make the statement, you're validating it in the correct manner, not saying it's scientific when it's just bloody obvious.
I see it as observation.
Oh, come on, Nathan, that can't. Go on, sorry.
There's no science needed. There's just, you've said, but you've got to understand the science of the gyroscope. Well,
Yeah.
When you say it, you've got to understand the cause and effect of the gyroscope.
Yeah, for you to view a gyroscope, yeah, and look at it and say it's not moving, you have to understand the implications of why it's not moving, why it's sat there in free space, and that comes from some scientific validation to get to that understanding that when you then look at it and see it's not moving, it makes sense. Does that? You know what I mean? You have to have there has to be a level of knowledge in
leave
some
out the word
things.
science, Adam.
Yeah, there's no science in it. There's just knowledge and understanding and studying and.
Well, no,
I showed my children when they were 8, I think they were, the gyroscope, and I showed, I was pushing on this side, pushing on that side, and putting it on a little wire and all the rest of it. And they don't know anything about science, but they understood it completely. I'm like, if I push on this side, where's it going to go? And they tell me, and it's a principle of understanding the principle of how a gyroscope works.
Yeah, cool. But you can
principle's
then
probably the wrong word as well. I don't know.
You can then specifically in relation to gyroscopes
is the word that we're mistaking science for an understanding of things, and just literally utilizing a piece of man-made equipment like a gyroscope or manufacturing it would take skill and understanding, but it wouldn't take any science.
No, okay, so that's not the point I'm making. So the science bit comes in is when you then apply science to it with regards to its motion of applied force. So when you start to set up experimentation, which gives you understanding of how, when an applied force on the gyroscope, how it acts. Okay, from the science that you validate from that gives you an understanding of a greater understanding, other than the obvious of when you hit the gyroscope, it doesn't move. It gives you a greater understanding of how those forces are applied. That then enables and more validates your obvious statement and enables you to quantify it more. Yeah, when you do say, look, there are no forces being applied to it. So that's where I see science is in things like this. There is science in it, but it's not at the end conclusion.
But there isn't. Where's the science? You
Nathan,
tell me which point is the science.
Nathan, can I ask you a question from chat?
Again?
How do you respond when they use the word science in the context of the science of music, cooking, astrology? You know, when they use that word broadly speaking.
All nonsense. Science establishes cause and effect. That's what it does. It's very, very, very limited. Very, very, very narrow.
They don't like it.
Don't care. It's tough.
I agree with the narrow and the limited side of things, because I have these debates on Twitter with people all the time, and they're like, oh, well, what do you believe that the sun is? What do you believe the moon is? Or what do you believe is happening when the sun goes down? Any number of these things. And I have to repeatedly point out that the whole point of what I'm doing is trying not to believe. I want to know. And what I want to know, and what I know, is something that I can test every day, and I can in my eyes, I can know it. I don't know if it's scientifically knowing it or anything along those lines, but like, I know that well, we're not spinning, and I can't find a curve, and moonlight is cold, and things like this. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought on diesel fumes, I think.
The negative. Again, if we stick to the gyroscope, you said, well, it's not moving. Well, if it was scientific, then you would never directly be testing the zero difference result. You're always testing to try and establish a cause of something. So let's ignore for a second that it's a man-made device, because science is solely looking at the natural world, naturally occurring phenomena. So automatically, if you try and establish the cause of anything about the gyro, well, man made that gyro. So the cause of it is man made it. So again, it's going to fall outside of science. But that doesn't mean that these things aren't intrinsically useful to people not dying on aeroplanes. And if they didn't obey certain principles, people would die. That's a fact. So they're not suddenly demeaned by the fact that they haven't been validated by a cause and effect relationship. So what? It doesn't change the fact that if they didn't do what they do, people would die. So these things are critically important in everyday life. Yeah. And to establish a foundation of logic based on the fact that it is just doing what it does is perfectly acceptable. But the way our reasoning works, because we're so used to fighting against somebody says it is supposed to be doing something that it isn't, you've kind of got this juxtaposition between the negative of something not happening, us not spinning, us not experiencing any inertial forces, us not seeing the gyroscope turn in its cradle. It's hard to kind of say, well, what do I see? Well, actually, I don't see anything happening. I don't feel the earth turning. I don't see any curvature. It's kind of the antithesis of having to prove it. That's why I say it's obvious and observable, not requiring science. But that's a bonus. That's a massive plus. The truth is genuinely on our side. This is why I'm so passionate about flat Earth. It's nice to be in a privileged position that you don't need to suddenly have to dress up your pseudoscience religious belief with nonsense, parlor tricks.
Yeah,
we don't do that.
I think that's where I fell off the rails earlier, was explaining to people on Twitter that it's okay to not know. That's a good thing. It's it's dropping all these. Well, what is it they say? Wisdom is knowing what you don't know, and that's what I enjoy. Is that although you say science is like a really narrow band, yeah, it is a narrow band, and it has a lot of qualifications to get into that narrow band. But if you're going to talk about science, then at least make sure it is science. And if you're going to step outside that band, then acknowledge that as well and name it something else, like zetetic observation or something along those lines. But yeah, absolutely.
Nathan, is there a difference between science and the scientific method? Because Rune Thorsten says in chat, science does not mean cause and effect. It means to know or close to it. Is there a difference between the two phrases?
1,000,001 definitions, but ultimately speaking, there is a methodology, and that is the scientific method. That is science. Now, because it's been diluted, you'll get 101 people coming with different definitions that say, no, my science allows this. Well, okay, let's take that to its logical conclusion. What's science trying to do? Well, it's trying to establish the reason behind a phenomena in the natural world. That's the purpose of science. And when we say what's causing a phenomena, we mean it in those literal terms, cause and effect. And how do you establish cause and effect? Well, surprisingly, there's a methodology for that. It's called the scientific method. So, no, unfortunately, there are a lot of, as John calls them, pretender clowns. And this is deeply upsetting to a lot of people because their science that they went to university or college, depending on your neck of the woods, to learn has had that word above the door each and every time they walked in when they're learning about mechanical engineering. And they're told it's a science. Well, unfortunately not. That's unfortunate. The same is applicable. You can't cherry pick. It's true. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. When we say, sorry, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you're a pseudoscientist. You can't establish cause and effect reasoning, bloody observations, and you're not going to tell me that it's obvious the Earth's turning and that's why we see the sun moving. No, sir, that's not obvious. We're not talking about the obvious and observable nature of our flat plane when we talk about the twinkly lights in the sky. That ain't science. By definition, because he says, well, science is right whether you like it or not. In other words, he frames himself in the context of science. He automatically becomes a pseudoscientist because when you take any of his assertions to their logical conclusion, you would apply a method, the scientific method, shock horror, and you wouldn't be able to establish a cause for any of the phenomena he observes. So he's only got a partial step in science, and that's step one, observe a phenomena. Well, he can do that all day long. Can Neil deGrasse Tyson? Oh, yes, they can observe a lot of phenomena. Well, you try and establish the cause of that phenomena, and then you've got a bit of a problem. Can't adhere to the method. These are pseudoscientists, but they only become pseudosciences when you try and dress it up as science, when you try and make it seem like that kid that was told when he was very young and impressionable that science proves things when you're in school. So you've got that distant memory to cling on to when someone says, this is science, you know. Oh, really? Well, that must mean it proves what you're saying then. I must trust what you say is absolutely factually accurate. Well, hang on a second. Someone over here has actually applied this method and they've established it to be true. And it's done through a particular way, systematic experimentation. Do it over and over and over and over and over again and prove it time and time again that your presumed cause is the cause of the effect. But that's so limited. Most things don't fall under cause and effect reasoning, especially the Earth.
So what you're saying is they've hijacked the meaning, they've given a very broad meaning for the word science, and they shouldn't have done it. Still should be narrow.
Yeah, because it's very powerful. You know, if you really dig into the roots of science, you'll find that scientific discovery has driven some amazing things in our world. Well, that's because it's a very useful methodology. If you need to figure out the cause of an effect, then it's very great.
Nathan, what would you? I mean, there's so many ologies now. What would you say are the ologies that are scientific? I mean, I'd sort of chemistry, biology.
The ones that comply with the scientific method.
Yeah.
John went through this on one of the presentations, and he listed them literally. And it's difficult to say any particular one because it depends what they're doing.
When you say John, who you?
John, quantum eraser.
Right. Okay. And this is what I was ultimately the question was about. Was those? I mean, astrophysics and quantum anything, none of them are science, are they?
Well, certainly. Well, it depends when you say quantum. What do you mean? Because the quantum eraser experiment is a scientific experiment, so it has adhered to the scientific method. It's studying light and its effects.
Okay, I'll quickly reverse back on that one and just say, what would you regard is scientific these days?
Anything that's established cause and effect. Simple as that. So John gives an example with scurvy. It's been established through scientific discovery in terms of the cause of scurvy, the vitamin C deficiency. So it's something that you can do through a process that will give you an actual valid scientific result in any field. It's just about applying that method to any phenomena.
So there's no real reason to segregate the fields in terms of different scientific regions like biology and chemistry and this, that, and the other. I mean, science is just a methodology, isn't it?
Precisely. Exactly.
Yeah. And then anyone can do it.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So scientists. What's a scientist? Well, are you applying the scientific method? Automatically, you are a scientist.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant.
So there's a message in chat that says, I think we should start looking into the Aristotelian different types of causes. No, because Aristotle was a philosopher, and philosophers are not scientific. They tell stories. Philosophy, that would be the antithesis of science, and that would be the worst thing possible that you could ever do. So let's not look at Aristotle for a way forward here. Let's learn the scientific method, because that's really helpful for us to prove things. We can prove a cause and effect. That's really where we need to be going, because that's not where science is currently at.
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering, because I'm no longer referring to my gyroscopic thing as an experiment or scientific, but I will cling to the sort of zetetic principles of common sense and logic or that sort of thing until proved otherwise. So I don't know. I'm shunning away from the scientific stuff because it is so acute. I don't know. What do people think about that?
Very wise. Very wise. Because there's nothing wrong with something being just clear, simple, obvious, and observable. There's nothing wrong with that.
It saves on all this bullshit as well, arguing of semantics and that sort of thing. But I also think it's incredibly important to be able to define what scientific is and what scientific isn't. And it seems to me that almost most things don't fall into the scientific realm, and the things that do are ignored.
I'd echo Nathan's thought that it's. I find it strange how there is this hierarchical difference between scientific and clearly bleeding obvious, and it seems strange over the past 50 years that the two have swapped positions, where now or in the past the clear and obvious would be the key driver of any decision. We all seem to be hoodwinked by and can have our clear and obvious observations overridden by a scientific statement. And to me, the two are now in the wrong position with regards to their importance. Yeah,
absolutely. Can I give you an example? Yeah. So Zach will probably pipe up after this. Hopefully, we'll see. So I've been meaning for ages to just literally lower and raise the camera in a nice flat hall that my kid goes to a playgroup in, and I did it. Got the shot I wanted. Very delighted. Publish it. Happy days. Lots and lots of trolley comments. One in particular from a guy called Heath Carmody. And Heath Carmody says, I've modeled this. That's not how it works. And you're like, okay. So this is a guy that will try and punt his technology, his model making ability, as some sort of scientific validation to what I've observed. It's like, no, mate, take your model, cram it up your ass, because I've seen it with my own two eyes. I don't need to validate anything here. Seen it. I've even shown you. Take it or leave it. Don't care. Couldn't give a crap. Doesn't trump what I've seen with my own eyes, and any bugger can replicate very easily. So take your model and go away. I've had enough of models. But before now, 6 months ago, maybe a bit longer, 8 months ago, someone comes along and says, I've put this into a computer program and modeled it. Let's have a look at the science of these angles. You go, oh no, have I got the angles wrong with my camera? No, you're just taking a picture of something. There's nothing wrong with just looking at something and seeing how it does something. That's fine. Just look at how your world works and go, yeah, that's how it works. Can I do it again? Who cares? You don't need to repeat it. You know, it doesn't make any difference. Once is enough. If you see something happen and you can explain it and you understand it, then you don't need to repeat it. You've got an explanation for it. If you see something and you haven't got an explanation for it, for example, you see wind turbines looking like they're going over the curve of the Earth according to these zealots who assert it based on the presuppositional R value in a calculator. You go, okay, right, well, let's just junk all that garbage religion and say, what's going on here? Why are we seeing these going over the curve of the Earth according to these globe heads? What's the actual effect? Well, the effect isn't validated by science. It's validated by sheer observation. You just figure out what you're looking at. What am I actually looking at here? I'm looking at something further away. Well, what happens when something gets further away? Well, it gets smaller. What happens when you look away at something further in the distance? Well, you look at it in a more limited angle, therefore forcing it to be a smaller angular size. The two are intrinsically linked. The limited angle that you view at, the angular size of the bottom of something. And it reaches a point where it starts to disappear. You can demonstrate it by lifting and lowering your camera. Now, that's all visual. I don't think I said the word science once. Don't need to. But I'm going to piss so many people off on this show. I hope Nick doesn't watch this. Nick from Phuket Word, bless him. I love Nick. He's wonderful. He's one of my favourite YouTubers. I really wish I could make videos like Nick. I can't. I've tried. This was probably the closest I ever came. Anyway, that aside, he said, this is real science in the comment. I was like, oh no, Nick, I know you mean well. I know you're congratulating me. I really appreciate your comment because you're the master of these videos. You know, thank you. I didn't criticise him on the comment. I wish I had now because I probably wouldn't have mentioned it twice on air. But there we go. That's the problem. As soon as I would try to say it's the science, look at my experiment. Well, what's your experiment? Well, I raise and lower my camera phone, you know, against the flat surface. That's my experiment. What's your hypothesis? If camera lowering, then flat floor. So you're saying that the camera lowering causes the floor to be flat? Well, no, that's nonsense. But it doesn't need a hypothesis for me to call it science. No, you're just a pseudoscience idiot. Whereas I just say, look at this observation. As I lower the camera, the bottom of stuff gets now more and more slim, just like Ranty's boats, because of the angle. There's a simple logical deduction. And we can see it time and time again. It's repeated at every distance we see. That's why we argue about it. We just didn't know that the nonsense that came along with the assertion at the beginning of this great big rant was that the ball is going over the bloody curve because of the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking curve calculator. Wasn't that delusion? We'd just say, what's going on here? Let's have a little look at it. Let's observe it a bit closer. Not let's science the shit out of this phenomena.
Yeah, I must shout out to Phuket World though. He does some fantastic videos.
Yeah, I've been saying what we're seeing is a fundamental limitation of a lens with a circular aperture. I don't use the word science at all. I don't use the word experiment anymore either. I'll say test or observation. You've taught me well, Nathan. But yeah, it is though. It's a fundamental limitation. You cannot not have this diffraction taking place. It's always going to be there. And the further away you go, the larger it will get. Always.
Yeah, precisely. The diffraction limit, also known as the angular size that we describe something as when you're looking at it based on what you're looking at it through. So your diffraction limit is based on the aperture of whatever it is you're using. In other words, this term also, I don't want to nip this in the bud, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, Zach. When people describe it, they're describing it like it's out there. Because you're looking at something and it's a picture of something, it's described like it's happening on the horizon or at the thing you're observing. It's not. It's happening this end. It's a limitation with your eye, for example. So
Exactly.
It's not the size of the iris. That's your diffraction limit. That's how far you can see, how small something can become before it disappears. So it's all down to the size of your lens, the eye. Or you go to a nice big zoom camera, and obviously your diffraction limit changes because you can zoom in on stuff. Yeah. So yeah.
Nathan, what did you think about? I had an idea last week about incorporating Adam's curvature calculator with Zach's diffraction, like minimum diffraction limits with and altitude factor as well. I don't know if you heard anything about that.
I don't. I'm sorry, I've not been keeping up with you.
That's all right. No,
but absolutely, those are the three things. That's it. So, yeah, you've got to take into account perspective. You've got to take into account the angular resolution of the lens that you're looking through, and you've got to take into account the angle of view. That's it.
Yeah,
that's what they've hijacked. That's what gives you your curve calculator.
And that's what I was thinking, because Adam's done this curve calculator to perfection. We've got Zach's Rayleigh criterion and the angular resolution. All we need is altitude, and that is a really powerful tool that someone like Ranty could use.
Yeah. Well, I think just probably to put it into, we've been chatting and stuff at looking at the formulas we've put together and seeing if we can make some bloody use of them, if you know what I mean. And obviously we've got Zach's thing, which I think is the most powerful. And I think where we're kind of looking at it is that's applicable over a flat plane, because that's what it applies to, a straight viewing angle, more succinctly. I think what me and John's been chewing over is to then use the exact curvature calculation to extrapolate the secondary viewing line and distance that would actually be applicable if it was on a ball, because the straight line viewing distance is very different on a ball as opposed to on a plane. They're the same thing. It is very different on a ball to the actual viewing distance. The viewing distance is different to the topographical distance as you go around the circumference. So the mathematics would change with regards to Zach's calculation. Now, what that should then be able to show you is from any angle, from any picture, the calculation from Zach's formula should show you the amount of obscuration that would be different. Now, if you can get that in comparative conditions, that should then be able to, and distances, that gives you for me a tool that could demonstrate again the lack of curvature.
Hold on, to get this straight, are you proposing a begging the question perspective inclusive curve calculator?
Yes. I knew you was going to say that.
What you're describing is a complete ball earth car crash, basically.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a reverse comparative tool. So you go, there it is, look, the bottom 3 foot is obscured or whatever because of X, Y, Z. Actually, if it was on a ball, the bottom 15 foot would be obscured. So it's a comparative ball bashing tool. I wouldn't necessarily. I actually preferred yours. Say it again, Nathan.
Would it be begging the question? It's going to assume the radius factor. So you've got the premise that you're on a ball straight away. So it's a begging the question fallacy, regardless of what we're doing here. But you beg the question and assume you're on a sphere with a given circumference. Then you say, let's actually factor in the real distances involved. What would happen based on your altitude because of the viewing angle and the limitations that causes? We've just discussed them. And the radius factor. So the diffraction limit of the lens that you're using. So obviously, you get a nice big zoom lens, and like we see, it works out better. You can see more. But you put that on a ball and then work it out based on your angle of attack, as I call it. I like that term. It gets a bit of criticism, but I think it's straight to the point. When you say angle of attack, people know exactly what you mean. The way you attack the target, right? The angle you point the camera at, the way you are angled to whatever it is in the distance. Anyway, I'm going to keep using that term, sod anybody who doesn't like it.
Miles
but yeah,
Davis.
when it's a complete car crash, stuff should be vanishing almost immediately. You should only be, stuff would. It's a total car crash.
So you do see its value.
I would avoid the spherical anything, and just concentrate on trying to create some sort of whatever it is, mathematical model of a flat plane and what you should see. And this will show people that things disappear from the ground up. Your feet disappear before your head, even on a flat plane. And this is why.
Just give me the code to Mick West's calculator. I'll change a few of the labels, and it actually works out quite well.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, it's true though, because whoever's done the calculations for it has actually done an exceptionally good job. There's a reason we have so many arguments about it when someone says, "Oh, look, I can see this thing in the distance that I shouldn't be able to see," and they go, "Oh no, look, the bottom 25 feet's missing." No, the bottom 25 feet at that distance is in the most limited angle possible and has started to vanish bottom up for the same reasons I demonstrate on the video that I put out a couple of days ago. Basically, the more limited that angle comes, the less you can see at that bottom limited angle. It becomes more and more and more squashed.
Well, it's not
at these distances.
Unnatural to think that curvature calculator, although it made it onto the humble site of Mick the Meta Junk nut job, it could have come from quite intelligent people. So yeah, I think it just needs tweaking.
Yeah, it's almost always spot on. The exceptions come when the clarity is just too good to overcome by the calculations. But as a general rule of thumb, that calculator works out beautifully how much what they call the refracted hidden value would be based purely on the angle of elevation causing this obstruction from bottom up. They call curvature. That's the refracted hidden value. That's where they get it from. And when we were first looking at this, we were saying, well, they've just omitted perspective, and thinking, well, if we slip perspective in, that would work out in our favor. Now you're taking it one step further and saying, well, let's include all of these things they've ignored on the journey to realizing that, as Jaron's now pointing out nice and concisely, it's not that they've ignored perspective, they've completely hijacked it. It just is a perspective calculator relabeled. That's why it works out so well all the time.
That's right. Perspective equals curvature in their calculations or their assumptions. Is that right?
Yeah, but they've also included, when they make it so critical that you put your height in correctly. That's why there's so many arguments about it, because it's critical, because it changes the angle that will be limited at distance. Obviously, if you're much higher up and you're looking straight down on something that's, not straight down, but 45-degree angle, say, from an aeroplane down on some high building, you've got a really wide angle, top and bottom, to that thing in the distance. So it's not going to disappear. But as soon as you put it against the flat surface of anything, an ocean, a table, the hall that I used, then you're limiting the angle to the bottom of it severely, to the point where you can get it down. Nothing.
Put simply, you go up higher, you open the angle up, which allows you to go see it from a further distance. It allows it to
Precisely.
shrink more.
Put simply, it's just bloody common sense, really.
Yeah, but what they say is you're rising up to see over the curve of the Earth. Here's our calculation for what you should see disappearing as you lower in altitude. Well, they've just figured out the angle of attack. And when people see some completely consistent mirage line all along the bottom, you know, I can see Zach in the background watching those videos going, that's the limit being reached. You know, that's where it lies. That's why it runs the full length of the image. And that's why Anthony and I discussed this the other day in debate. When we got to the lighthouse itself has got that line running directly through the middle of it. It runs the full length of the image of the Isle of Man. And that's right on the limit. That's right on the limit of what you can see at the angle that Anthony was when he took those images. You know, that would change based on how high or low he was. And that's why it got debated so heavily. But the rumpus would never mention it. And we'd be like, well, what's this mirror line then? How are you going to account for that? And at the time we were harping on about, well, how are you going to ray trace this? How are you going to put it in your models? Because we didn't realize they were just begging the question. But ultimately speaking, that was our focus. And we couldn't figure out why Rumpus wouldn't talk about it. It's because if you ultimately try to give any explanation for it, it'll lead you down the path of figuring out where the diffraction limit lies. That's what you're seeing. That's why it's consistent. That's why it runs the length of the image.
Love it. I really do. Yeah.
Have you? Sorry, John. Just to keep it on track. There's a little bit that come out this week that I wanted. I did a little bit of photoshopping work, and I was kind of hoping Ranty was here because I wanted teaching a bit. But have you seen Miles, the Liar Davis's retort with his hardboard down a hall?
But Ranty described it verbally.
Yeah. So there's been a little bit of that. I'll see if I can share screens. Second. Wrong one.
Adam, while you're fulfilling.
Yeah.
I'm just coming to the end of my fuse here, so not my fuse, my candle wick.
I know what you meant.
Yeah, I'm high as a kite on diesel fumes off my face, and it's getting a bit late. We're knocking on for the second hour, so I'd like to say thanks so much to Anthony and Nathan, and I put a little request in to you, Josh, if you could just read that quote from Newton. Can you see it?
Josh there.
Oh, I'm here. No. See it where?
Sorry, bud. Let me share screen.
Yes.
Okay, you can see it now.
Just give me 1 second, John. I'm cocking around.
I hear
sharing
Adam clicking
screen.
away. He's working on it.
I can hear you clicking away. I'm buying you some time here, and I'm also politely saying, without being rude, that I'm buggering off.
Well, bugger off.
And
Love you, cuz.
I was just
That's a
wanting
good one, man.
Josh to read
You're
out.
going to be hanging around for another hour.
You
Get
I
know
on
will
it.
be,
it, Zach.
yeah, you know it, but I won't be talking.
Well, we'll see.
I'll
We'll
be
see how
huffing
that
on my
works out.
bag of glue, and I'll be sniffing the exhaust.
Got your diesel,
pipes,
right?
and-
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're knocking on for 1 o'clock here. I know. Actually, it's a really bad excuse when I'm joined by 2 UK guests. But yeah, there you go.
I dropped a video in the chat. If you fast forward to like 310, if you want to watch it, it explains angular resolution. And when you
Sweet.
lower the angle, it really it shows how it all works.
Josh, can you
If you want
please
to watch the
read
whole
that out?
thing, it's 8 minutes long or something like that. But I went to a road where it just had a little like slant in it, and I showed that when I lower my camera down, the slant it shows a mirage, and then it shows the surface behind it, like it's I don't know. It explains exactly what Nathan was saying. The closer you get down to it, once it reaches a certain angle, that diffraction starts taking place and it starts compounding.
This is why I love Phuket word stuff, because a lot of it is done in small scale. It's not, over miles and miles of distance. The one he did with a lighter across a playground that was clearly flattened. It's just amazing.
So, John, I'm seeing a picture of a hallway with some boards on it. Is that what you want me to read, or have you dropped a link in the chat room somewhere?
I don't know who's showing that, but
It's me.
Can you stop sharing?
Let me stop sharing then, and then.
Okay, let me start sharing.
Please share, Mr. Savage.
No, there's something to read, sort of. I see two windows that look like might be the same thing. One's big and one's small, but the small one's on the top. If I can get access to the big one, that would
there we go.
Swell.
All right, and that's from Isaac Newton's. I think it's from his archives, anyway.
And just that paragraph right there.
Yeah.
It is inconceivable that inanimate brute matter should, without the mediation of something else, which is not material, operate upon and affect other matter without mutual contact. That gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum, without the mediation of anything else, by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Gravity must be caused by an agent, acting consistently according to certain laws. But whether this agent be material or immaterial, I have left to the consideration of my readers.
Brilliant. Cheers, Josh. I thought that's an amazing quote. He's basically holding his hands up going, nothing to do with me.
It's almost Shakespearean in that you need to take it almost sort of sentence fragment by sentence fragment on these huge ass run-on sentences and break it down and just sort of write it out in layman's terms, just what the fuck he's saying.
Well, don't you find that is that, the way we were taught to write, we'd have been marked down if we wrote a sentence like that with all the commas and everything in it. And it's what, 2 sentences, maybe 3, and it's like an entire paragraph. You'd be slapped around the head if you did that in real life.
Mr. Hemingway, he likes to do that.
He's basically saying you've got to be a complete moron to believe this shit. That's what he's
basically what he's saying.
That's it.
He's like, don't put my name on this crap, please, don't. And then he carks it, and gravity is Mr. Newton's thing.
Can you stick it back on screen so I can reread it?
He's quite specific in his taking of the piss, isn't he? He goes that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act. Oh, you've got rid of it.
Oh, sorry, I was resharing it.
There you go.
You got it back?
Yeah. So the point being, so that one body may act upon another at a distance. And I like that. Through a vacuum, it's almost like he's laughing here. Like through a vacuum, without the mediation of anything else, by and through their action and force, may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. There's a guy actually that you see on YouTube at the moment going, "Are you a fucking retard?" That reminds me and backs that statement up.
So who's this quoting? Is this quoting Newton?
This is Newton. This
is apparently Newton, his third letter to Bentley on the 25th of February 1693, quoted in the works of Richard Bentley, DD, blah 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 blah. It's
Yeah, that's pretty epic, man. That's awesome.
I think that's gonna have to make its way into that little bit of work I'm doing in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. I was thinking it needs to go somewhere important. That would be awesome.
He's essentially saying if you have got sound reasoning, i.e., you're not completely stupid, no way you'd accept this. And I see it as complete nonsense. That's what he's saying.
Basically, yeah. He's sort of saying, I saw an apple falling from a tree. Now, don't fucking tie me into all this space-time continuum stretching nonsense. It's nothing to do with me. I saw an apple falling from a tree. That's it.
I tell you what, Nathan, in your most expressive language, in your most expressive, condescending, patronizing tone, do you want to read that out, like adding the emphasis to where you see it? Because you're probably the most colourful with your prose.
Amazing.
I can't. It's too small on my screen.
Oh, is it?
Just to be able to read it. But no.
If you did it in the style of Basil Fawlty out of Fawlty Towers, you could probably do this and everybody would understand it.
It is inconceivable.
Yeah. Or if you did it in the style of Gem Panda when he's losing his temper, it would work brilliantly.
As much as this probably is a translation, as far as I'm concerned, however, whoever phrased it is extremely eloquent. You know, it's very well put. Person who is of sound reasoning and cognition, I think he phrases it, or something along those lines. You're like, well, right, you're saying if you're not a complete Dumbo, you would never think this is real. And as soon as you read that, was it Walt? Who read it? Was it you, Walt?
No, that was me, Josh.
No, that was Josh.
Oh, sorry, Josh. When you were reading it, I was thinking, I'm picturing all the people that punt this. You know, it's like Newton said, if you're of sound mind, you would never believe this shit. So what, by Newton's standard, you guys are all buffoons.
Yeah, that's gonna have to go in there, I think, Nathan, don't you think?
I don't know. I'm getting loads of information at the moment about the history hoax, so this would be pretty ancient stuff as far as those people are concerned. So maybe
check its veracity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, right? It's their history, right? So if we're using their history against them, I don't see the problem with it if it's their history.
Oh, no. Sorry, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm just talking for the benefit of the audience now. In other words, what I'm saying is, as much as, yes, absolutely, you would use Newton and Cavendish and Aristophanes, you can use any of these people. That's part of their narrative. So, yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying, you know, for the purposes of whether or not we take it as read, well, I don't. Let's just put it that way.
I love the eloquence of it, though.
Nice. I love it. Great little snippet. But that is, according to them, that's part of Newton's dialogue with some other person in a letter. Then wonderful. You know, I'll take it. Poo all over their argument with it. I love it.
This is the third letter to Bentley, dated the 25th of February 1693, and it's quoted from the works of Richard Bentley in 1838. So, as with everything in history, it's subject to possible adulteration after the event.
Yeah. So it's so the actual reference is from somebody else in the 1830s.
Yeah.
So this is actually a 19th century reference, correct?
Yeah, 19th century reference. Yeah. But it's
like all of them.
Yeah, but it's the third letter to Bentley dated 1693, which is about 15 years after he did his Principia, right? Didn't he do the Principia in 1670 something?
You'd be the one to know this narrative better than any of us at the moment, Anthony. You're looking at it. You'd probably know the date better than us. Probably right.
I thought, John's left, hasn't he?
No, he's there, Eddie. He's just
No, I haven't. But you definitely should be the person to know this, Riley. If you're writing a freaking paper
I'm opening
on
it up right now.
No, I want my 20 quid back.
Yeah.
Just while you're looking at it, just want to mention something to Zach, because I had to dig this out in lieu of the the video I just made, and I know you liked it, and I'm grateful, and it makes me very proud that you are enjoying that video, or you discussed it, Zach. But someone else caught this, what you described about 5 minutes ago. I will check out that link that you posted. But someone else did it, and it was a chap named Al K. And Al K was debunking Ranty by having I can't remember it doesn't even matter what the subject was about, but he basically put a P900 in his car and drove around. And at one point, he's got the camera zoomed in on the road that he's traveling along, and there's a hill, and there's a car that goes over the crest of the hill as he's coming up the hill, forcing the angle to narrow. And what do you know? You get a mirage. You get the number plate and the lights and the everything else along that angle, along the full horizontal line, along the full plane, where that angle has been limited to basically nothing by virtue of the surface of the hill. You get the light in the distance, the street light, miraging, the lights on the car, miraging, the bumper, the tail, the exhaust, miraging. You get this effect, and it's all because of the angle. So, I mean, no doubt what your video will contain, because Al K's also had it in his video when he was trying to do something totally different. And the problem for all these globe heads, you can't escape reality. Whenever they try and film anything, that's why they love their models. As soon as you film something, you can look into it and find where they actually prove the real nature of reality by observation. So that was one example of that. The limited angle caused a BMW 5 Series to mirage upon itself at a matter of, I don't know, less than a quarter of a mile.
Let me just
I have that video I put in chat, and then I have another one I'll drop in chat right here where it shows that happening. It's a real lumpy highway, I call it. A lot of ups and downs, but they're real narrow. It's going through a swamp pretty much, a farmland that used to be swamp. So the road is real wavy, and it mirages like 6 or 7 different times because it's a hill, and then it comes back up, and then another hill, and then it comes back up. It's really cool. And I'll drop that one in chat right now too.
Yeah, and again, it's probably going to be the exact same effect. So you've got this angle that's increasing, decreasing on the road surface, and that causes these very limited mirages at that tight little angle. And you can see it in a nice big effect when someone like Al K's got a great camera, like a P900 zoomed in. You're like, wicked. It's nice and big now. You can see that nice mirage going on.
This is what I wanted to show you guys, and what I wanted Zach's opinion on, and you Nathan, and Anthony as well. I'll share this stuff again. I mentioned the Miles Davis.
Who?
You know.
You mean Miles the Liar Davis?
Oh, there you go, son. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, just 2 things. It was 6 years after the Principe of that letter. And just a really quick one. Al K's latest video, Flat Earth Can't Scale. 15,000 views, right? All of his previous other videos are around about 1,000 views. And he's got 15,000 in less than a week. I think he's been going to the school of Simon Dan to learn how to do that. So shout out to Al K for 15,000 views.
15. That's epic.
Yeah.
It's got to be some shit hot content.
Yeah, I went and checked him out because he posted something on Nathan's video that I had posted a comment trying to say something. I shut him up real quick though. But yeah, there was a bunch of his videos that were like 100, 120 views, less than 100 views. Then all of a sudden it starts getting to thousands, and yeah, now it's 15,000. Yeah, I think he exactly what you said there, Anthony.
Yeah, he's been learning from Simon Dan and Conspiracy Flaps as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, sorry, not Josh, Walt, that video you punted out to us minutes before we went live, how about you put a link to that in the chat or wherever, and we'll see if we can get that to 15,000.
Yeah. Can I ask an obvious
He's been on that
question?
exhaust again, hasn't he?
Can I ask an obvious question about this this video of Miles the Liar Davis?
Well, let me give a quick description of it.
Well, what's the purpose of the wood?
Well, it's to create a flat surface because apparently that fucking carpet's not flat enough. No, there is a secondary explanation he gives. Is because he like named it because I've got a Samsung S9. Because I've got an S9, camera's mounted in the middle. So apparently, because in Nathan's video, it's a kind of response to Nathan's vid, isn't it? This, so he's put that there so that there's an extra 1 and a bit centimeters, so that when he puts his camera below the level of the plywood, it's much lower down rather than digging a hole. So that there is a purpose, but you can.
But there is a problem though, right? There's like zero reflectivity on the wood, whereas the floor that Nathan was using was quite glossy. It might not have been glossy, but it's certainly reflecting. And he's not going to get much reflection on that, is he? I wouldn't have thought.
Let's have a look. Let's see what he does.
I've just got a couple of stills here because I don't want to play his vid. But this is his starting position. And basically his point, Nathan, is from what I can see is, and he sarcastically takes the piss out of attack angle, which a lot of his little chums in the chat jump on as if it's some kind of victory. And are sad in it, the things they enjoy. But his basic point is here, look, you can see the height from here that this is at, and then when you lower the camera down to here, it's a much it's at the same level apparently. And I'll just, because obviously Miles didn't do this, but what I do if I zoom in, first thing I want to look at is and start to see that what from the back looked like a straightforward image actually has a lot of the issues you were just talking about.
The problem is though.
What?
Go on. It's all right.
There is a bit more. I'm only pointing out some because obviously I watched his video to see the point. I mean, he goes in great detail using the door handle, which is in the center of frame when you stood up, as his real explanator. But you can see here this miraging is actually happening. Yeah, you can see the blurring from up earlier. You can see a definitive black line, which is the join between the two things. Now, what I did, I kind of saw that and I thought, well, I'll just kind of. I've got Photoshop and I'm shit with all sorts of stuff, so you'll have to excuse me on this. So what I did was, look, from the other picture, I took a shot and I zoomed in, and then I made it sort of. You can see the width of the door here, so I made it. This is from the other picture. Made it the same width. So, and then I'm going to place it online with the other one. And if you look at this one, I've kind of lined them up, and there was a number of things that became observant. The first one is this is strangely suddenly a lot bigger look, almost like it's mirroring on itself. Otherwise, why is it no longer as thin it was? And this is the same. I've just put them next to each other. And on Photoshop, you can actually zoom in here and see the mirroring of the lens here. This is 4 pixels wide, and this is only 2 on here. So my conclusion was that, it was again a misrepresentation of the evidence from Miles. What did you call him, Tony?
Miles Liar Davis.
Yeah. Very strange.
The thing that pisses me off about this, and I never even watched it, I just saw that he'd done something, and I didn't even bother watching it. But what I realised with the wood, right, even though I understand now by your explanation that it was to compensate for the height of the lens in the camera, the problem is that is still failing to repeat and validate the experiment itself or the observation, because you're supposed to do it like for like. This is a bit like Slice Bar Kane putting styrene boards down for the Cavendish experiment, which didn't actually have styrene boards down for the Cavendish experiment. So it's like, why would you do this? Isn't the way to do this, if you don't have the phone that's capable of doing it, either to not repeat it because of that reason, or get a different phone that can repeat it, but go to a floor that's flat, not put wood down, because that's completely it's just utterly garbage for validating or repeating the observation that was originally done. He hasn't done that at all.
It's a very strange, like I said, the point he sets out to prove, I genuinely don't feel that he does. As you can see here, it actually demonstrates all of the points you guys have made over the past year of, starting from the Isle of Man, mirror banding, refraction, and actually obscuring what they would call that curvature. Look, see the haze here.
They would call it curvature, you're right.
He's actually demonstrated what they call curvature, which is this. Zach, you've got the words. Help me.
Which one?
We shouldn't even be discussing
diffraction limit?
Yeah. Is that what that is? We're seeing this here. To me, that is Aries diffraction. That, in effect, this is where the points of light are no longer distinguishable as individual points there.
Yeah, that's diffraction. That's the two light sources coming together because the angle has gotten too narrow to distinguish them. Yeah, this is, like I said, it's a fundamental limitation. That means it cannot be avoided of every lens with a circular aperture. There are 6 types of diffraction that take place, but Aries diffraction takes place right along the center and cuts the top of your eye from the bottom of your eye.
Do we have to
always happen?
Do we have to promote this video anymore? Can we not talk about paint drying or something?
Yeah, I'm done then. Okay, fair shout, bro.
The guy's an utter moron. He's like Sean Hufford. He's not able to do anything. Like citing people. He's not able to do that. He's totally disingenuous.
Well,
drives me mental.
That was my point, mate. The conclusions that I watched it, and with an open mind, but I looked at it, and like I say, and it didn't seem quite right what he was saying from what he was trying to pretend that this angle of attack makes no difference, and obviously that didn't make sense. So I did a little bit of analysis. You can see there, and as you say, yeah, the reality is the evidence he presented did not match the conclusions he draws. So yeah, I don't know if that's lying or just being stupid.
Well, if your camera's not designed to do that particular task very well, why would you then go and completely redo the experiment, right, or the observation in such a way that you completely fluff it up and mess it up, and then claim anything from it? Because if it's based on not repeating the observation, and that's like useless. I mean, get somebody else's phone, go and do it in a supermarket or a long corridor or whatever, and then see, because that will be validating the claim. But by doing it the way he's done it, he's not validated the claim in the first place because he's not repeated it. It's the first rule of like the scientific method is to show your method, and then let somebody go and validate it by repeating it. And he hasn't done that.
We're not doing science.
Shut up.
Science.
I know. But my point is that he hasn't repeated the thing that you did. You did it on a glossy floor that, I mean, put it this way, everyone's saying, well, the tiles might not be perfectly flat and all that. Yeah, that may well be true, but it's not a curve, is it? The floor's not got a curve to it, right?
I've got to get out for that. So I put that on. I was very lucky that Flat Earth Audio remastered it and did motion tracking on it, so it's nice and stable and makes me look really good. But at the end, I point out that the obstruction occurs before the camera gets to the floor. So unless you start claiming that there's several inches, you'd have grannies tripping over them, let alone people playing ping pong tournaments on the bloody thing. It's a very flat floor. But the point being that before I even get to the floor, not to mention the fact that the camera lens is obviously above slightly the case of the camera, I don't even have to get to the floor before it disappears completely. So you've got to be starting to claim that there's, several inches of obstruction on that floor that's creating not a perfect mirror. Yeah, people have walked on it over the past 60 years, but you've still got a mirror image of the stuff that's along that floor. You can't claim that there's tiles out by a couple of inches. Literally, like I say, drop the camera before I get to the floor. It's gone because it's already reached the limited angle because it's a nice long hall.
I saw you. Go on, sorry, Anthony.
I had to laugh at M. Scott Veach because he was arguing that the tiles were that wonky that it effectively was causing what we see. And I said, yeah, but it's not a curved floor, though, is it? And he said, yeah, I'd say that it was a curved floor. And he gave a particular a word for that curved floor. And I said, wait a sec. I said, you're literally going to argue, but because you're now presented with evidence that conflicts with your position, you're going to argue that that floor is bent. And not bowed, like you can imagine that human traffic would cause a bowing in it, like bending down in the middle. Definitely not bending up in the middle. But he's now going to argue, because he's found evidence contrary to his opinion, that the floor is actually bending the opposite way to the way you might reasonably think that it might bend the opposite way, like bowing in the middle. But he's now going to argue that it's convex in the middle, and I'm like, you're going to do that solely because you think
built in the 1850s, and I can verify that old boards and old houses bow in the middle downward.
That's right. But he's now going to argue that the floor's going the opposite way just because it doesn't support his position. And his answer was, yeah. And I'm like, well, you're a moron. He thinks it's normal. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, got to argue.
Funny.
That's where, Anthony, when you descend their position into farce, and that's the only position they can take, a farcical position. So in other words, their conclusion, we're not doing science, we're just looking at this, right? They look at it and go, well, obviously, the 90% of it, which will be in the center of the room, not at the edges where people don't walk, that's going to cause it to bend in such a way that it bends up and causing the obstruction, because it's at least a 2-inch bend upwards, to start blocking the thing in the distance before the camera even reaches the floor. That's bent up.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Conclusion.
Yeah, when I asked him that question, though, his answer was yes. And I'm like, you're a moron.
But that's why we win, because we're not talking science, we're talking logical deduction. And logically, you deduce from what you can see that you've got a limitation to the angle. That's what we've shown in every single image. The fact that these boneheads say, yeah, it's curvature, is as ludicrous when they assert it about the Earth as it is when they assert it about some bloody church hall floor.
Yeah, go and do it in a supermarket with a polished tile floor, because they're pretty much straight and flat, because they don't have any ridges on it, because people will slip, trip, and fall, right? So supermarket floors are pretty much level, and then see if you get the same results that Nathan did. And what do you know? You probably will.
Yeah, I did it in a warehouse where they drive forklifts, and it has to be level.
You were the originator of this, Zach. You are ground zero for this. You know it. I know it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I even mirrored your video where you did it. You basically.
I know. This is why you had me on your show for that was the first time I ever went live was with you.
And yes, that your video doesn't have enough views to warrant how good it is.
Yeah, don't worry about all that stuff.
The video we're talking about is Zach's in a warehouse, and he's got, I think they're paint cans, right? Paint can lids?
Yeah, the lids.
Yeah.
And an A4 sheet of paper. And he backs away from it, and then he lowers and raises the camera. It's as simple as that. It's so easy, anybody could do it. But Zach was the first. It's genius. I wish it was me. It wasn't. It was Zach, of course.
Yeah, I got lucky. Actually, I got that idea from Rob Skiba and his going over the Lake Michigan while he drove away from it on the rode the boat across Lake Michigan from the Chicago harbor away from it. And it showed that same thing happening. I was like, hey, I can do this right here on this warehouse floor. And the very first one was with a lighter. I did it with a lighter with some white stripes.
You had people saying the same thing, Zach.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that floor is curved. Yeah. I remember Gem Panda saying, oh, it's got something to do with the lighting. I was like, okay, I'm done even arguing with you anymore.
Do you know what's really funny as well? when you go into like the likes of Jeremy's Discord, or you go into Betty's Discord, and what they want to do is they want to take you down a very narrow path to a particular point, right? And it can be anything, right? But when they get to the thing that they think's a gotcha, whatever that narrow interpretation is, whatever the narrow path that they've taken you down, they've took you down it for whatever reason. But I said to one guy today, I said, listen, why is it that you want to go down a very narrow path on this topic, right? Before you've got to the basics, or you've got to the bottom of the basics, in the terms of like the points that Nathan brings up on his show, for housekeeping, like gravity, curvature, axial rotation, all of these basic things don't have evidence to support them. Yet you want to go down to a really narrow like rabbit hole where you end up asking a really narrow specific question, like, well, how would that work on a flat Earth? And it's like, who cares? Show me where the gravity is. Show me where the curve is. And they don't think about the really basic stuff. They want to go down this really narrow thing where it becomes so remote that you don't even know where to even start with it. Flat Earth or ball Earth, it's become farcical. But they want to argue about the minutiae of these really narrow rabbit holes that they took you down. And it's like, hang on a sec. I said, why are you not arguing or trying to prove the things that are in the housekeeping? Because these things in housekeeping are really important. And these observations that are being done over the horizon with Soundly and whatever, we're finding that we can repeat and recreate all of these effects that you guys told us was curvature. And you guys just go, nah. And it's like, come on. But they'll ignore it, and they'll start arguing about satellites and whether they're painted with paint reflective material or whether it's bare metal and stuff like that. And we're like, this is just ridiculous. Bad.
I think it's where they've had to take the debate, Anthony, to be honest, is there, where you describe, and the other place, which is really noticeable on Nathan now, is these retarded ballers coming in that, like when I was on the other day, you're going through the absolute basics of their model, and, it's quite clear they're coming in to just fill up the time with their basic ignorance of their own religion. And it's basically all they've got left to go, because where they can't go is into the understanding, the science. I nearly didn't use the word, and whether that's and the reasoning and the logic and the aesthetic observations that we've got, and they're scared now because I think a lot of the things that have always been used to bat us away as lunatics, the things that, and I was on the street on Nottingham, and it was great fun pulling stuff out, you know what I mean, and watching people go, and I think that's the reality, and that's why they're not coming, because whether they're paid shills or not, their arguments have disappeared, and there's nothing left to kind of come back at us with.
Your context for science that time was right, because you were like, they can't come to us with science, and that is very
that.
Yeah, no, that's
well done, Adam.
Because they
Get
want
in
to a certain extent, don't they? They want to be saying, I can scientifically validate my assertion about this globe Earth religion I have. So they can't come with science. You're absolutely correct, but they want to. That's where we win. So I just don't want flat earthers to be stuck in the same position 2 years from now, when everyone's been saying experiment this and experiment that, and then they all go, well, okay, let's see your independent variables for all these assertions you all stand behind now. And then suddenly a really great observation suddenly gets turned into pseudoscience, instead of it just being a really, really cracking observation.
Speaking of really good observations, have you seen J. Toller Media's latest one?
Yeah, infrared guy, very cool.
1,000-mile observation of the Hudson Bay. He thinks he's looking at the Hudson Bay from 1,000 miles away. I mean, it goes beyond crazy to think that the curve on it is like, it's just gone. It's like so far gone. It's like you might as well be antipode to yourself. It's that bad. And he's seen what he says is, and I'm not sure that he is, because it's really difficult to. But he's got the experience of looking at numerous things now. So it's kind of like bloody hell. Maybe it is, and if he is really looking at it, I mean, it's just not. It's so far beyond game over now. It becomes a joke. I think his work's got to go down as like the work of the year.
You're like a newbie. Look, Anthony, I'm gonna level with you, mate. Earth is flat.
I know, but don't forget there are people that are not necessarily as far down their own journey as what we are. I mean, we're just. It doesn't matter. Anyway, listen. On a better note, on a lighter note, have you seen? And I'm plugging this to death because I think it's brilliant. Have you seen the thief in Blackpool that was stealing the crate of beer?
Yeah.
Ross out of Friends.
Have any of you guys in America seen this?
I have not.
I don't know. I don't think I have.
love this.
Well, you know David Schwimmer, Ross out of Friends.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah.
He actually tweeted saying that's not me because it looks so much like him.
Well, not only did he tweet, right, what's happened is Ross, David Schwimmer's got a doppelganger in Blackpool, right? And he's been caught on CCTV stealing some beer, a crate of beer, like 10 tins of beer or whatever, still in the cardboard. And he's walking out and he glances up at the camera and he's the doppelganger for David Schwimmer, right? Everyone's pointed the finger at David Schwimmer and he's responded by saying, look, it wasn't me. I'm over in New York. Anyway, it's got momentum to it, and everyone started talking about it. And he's ended up recreating the actual stealing video of him stealing a crate of beer, but in New York at the same time. So his alibi is actually that he wasn't stealing in Blackpool; he was stealing in New York. But he's recreated it, and he's even got like the cardboard thing that the beer is actually in. He's got it creaked the same way, so that as he's walking down the aisle and glances up at the camera. Honest to God, the doppelganger is so similar to him, it's unbelievable. And his alibi, he's gone out and recreated the video, and his alibi is that he was actually stealing in New York at the time. It wasn't him. But the police they've had a back and forth on Twitter with him and thanked him for his good humour. But it's got to be the video of the year for me because it's just brilliant that he's gone out and done it. It's just great humour. So if you haven't seen it, just go onto Google and type in David Schwimmer, Blackpool thief or something like that, and you'll find it. It's absolutely excellent.
I've got it up on screen, Tony.
Oh, hang on, let me get it back on. Let's have a look.
Yeah, I've got it. I should be on the Skype screen.
Is it? Have you got them side by side?
It's been scrolling.
Yeah, this is it. So that's the doppelganger. And then hopefully it shows him side by side, and the resemblance is uncanny.
I don't think this has got him replicating it in. Maybe this is an earlier feed of the story because it's just comparing Doppelganger to him.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but that's just comparing him to the doppelganger.
Yeah, it is. You want the one where it gets the video side by side.
Right, the two videos, because if you see the two videos, because obviously it's not perfect, but you've got the actual David. Here we go.
Wow, that's eerie almost.
Well, no, that is him.
Yeah, that is him. But then the other guy, if you look at the other video, there should be like the other video that shows him.
Right, I'll start it now then. There you go.
Last video was the guy in Blackpool stealing beer. This is David Schwimmer replicating it in New York.
And that's the original. That's the other guy. Doesn't it look like him?
That's quality.
As you can see, I was in New York. Good luck with the investigation. How good is that, though? I mean, massive kudos to David Schwimmer for doing that because it's like, it's just ace that he went and did that. Went and did it.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Funny.
Excellent.
It's got a good sense of humour.
Yes. Should get a Flatty Award for it.
Right. Have we had a nomination this year?
Well, we've nominated Ranty for having the Wonkiest Horizon Award.
Gotta win that.
Yeah.
I mean, has Iron Realm been nominated for a Flatty? I don't know. I don't know.
That's a polite no, Nathan. We all know that. Funny. Oh well. Maybe next year.
I had a nomination last year. I think that was from you, Nathan, actually,
Yeah,
for my lit experiment.
I put my foot down with a few people who definitely deserve nominating. You being one of them, Ranty being another, and you, Anthony.
For what? Nominated for what?
For your observation. So quick to forget.
The best thing about that observation was when Jeremy spotted that lighthouse, and I said, live on air, like contemporaneous, without any thought, I said, I'm sure that lighthouse would be behind the curve of the earth. And the minute we put it through the figures, and they're like, yeah, that's gone. And it's there in the picture, and Jeremy's found it. It was like, oh, that was glorious.
Nice.
Yeah, he stopped liking us after that, didn't he?
Yeah, he didn't like it. And what he then did was started off this tirade of abuse aimed at like what he claimed was my so-called lie. And he's never, ever apologized for it, right? I'm sure he still maintains his position, but he doesn't come on the show anymore, which, good riddance as far as I'm concerned. But he's had to carry on and double down and triple down and quadruple down on this so-called lie. And it's like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? And it's got that stupid now. I can't even remember what the issue was, but it's... he's just stupid.
It's about whether the Earth's flat or not, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one thing that he did that was great. He used the Girl Guides map to make a point.
Oh, yeah.
And what he'd done is he'd scribbled off the Girl Guides reference to it. So we knew that, and we knew where this was as well, because we've been looking at it ourselves and realised that's what map he'd used. And he cropped off the bit where he said about Girl Guides. And when we pointed that out to him, it just discredited him immediately. And we just laughed at him for ages about it. And we never saw him again.
Hey, Nathan, have you got a, this is just like, I'm flashing back to me ringing up the lighthouse department and speaking to the bloke that installed the new light in that lighthouse and all the crazy shit your show's done. Have you got anything planned for
tomorrow?
The birthday, yeah. What is there special in terms of the show, or are we allowed to ring up and ramble?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's a crazy, crazy show. I mean, there's been some fantastic moments, like with Mackled Lighthouse. They're all spontaneous, aren't they? Nothing's ever planned. That's what I love about this. That's why I haven't burnt out. If I was planning what I was going to do on each show, I'd drive myself nuts. So I just I fire it up, send the invite out, don't know who's going to come, and that's how I like it. I think it's great. It works out for the best. Seems to have anyway. It's certainly
remember that, Andy? Andy rang me up, didn't you, one morning, and we're chatting about it, and he's put something in my head, and I ate it, not knowing stuff. So I've thought, sod this. I've looked up the lighthouse place. Give a ring via the website to the bureau, and chatted to this nice lady. She said, "I'll tell you what, Don, I'll put you through to the guy. He's just come back from refitting the Morgold Lighthouse, hasn't he, with a new LED light and that." And we confirmed a load of the data Anthony wanted, but basically the funny thing was he kind of said, yeah. As I explained, it was flat Earth. He said, "Oh yeah, it won't work otherwise."
Yeah, basically admitted that they don't work on a sphere.
That was the engineer.
Yeah.
We've seen this lighthouse, Anthony. During the time of the debates, we didn't realise it was begging the question fallacy. I'm just going to drop this in because you said I can't remember what you were debating about with Gem Panda. Well, what you were debating about was the height. Now, in the begging the question prospective hijacking proof of nothing curve calculator, they make a very big deal about you getting the height really, really important. You've got to get the height right of the observation, very important. Oh, and you've got to get the distance right. That's very, very important. And you've got to beg the question that we've got a radius. That's very important too. So that's how the fallacy works with the calculator. They make it seem like it's the most critical thing in the world to get the height right, while they simultaneously demand that you beg the question and assume you're on a bloody sphere. So now we've figured that out. It's like Gem's whole issue, Gem Panda's issue with the height. Who gives a shit? Literally, your calculator proves nothing. It begs the question. It's automatically got you on a sphere. It doesn't matter what value you put in. It doesn't matter what the height is. So where he thought it was so critical that Anthony taking a value off Google, which they're now an ounce as their model. So they've literally got no model at all. At all, literally. Ask a globehead. Let's see your model. Show me your model. Then you'll have a good laugh. But that was the problem. Their model in this instance was Google hanging on by its bloody fingernails. And Anthony took the values foolishly. Why would you take them from a model you were testing? And then they debunked the fact that the model itself had the wrong values, claiming that the observation was void based on their Google Earth model being wrong with its elevation values that Anthony picked out of. So that was what they tried to debunk. But now we realise that of the three values, height, very critical at the time, according to GemPanda, distance, very, very critical, and begging the question, including a radius, assuming you're on a sphere to begin with, knowing the outcome before you've done a damn thing. Yeah, we'll ignore that bit. We'll just focus on how important it is to get the height right. So there you go.
Adam, can you bring up what I'm looking at just for a second? This is my first California sunset. I'd just like to share it with y'all.
Figure out how to do that, Zach. Give me a second.
Well, Zach's
Your
got a screen
camera,
share.
your camera is rotated, Zach. Just letting you know.
I'm looking at myself.
No, you're looking sideways. You're on the equator right now.
Yeah, you're on the equator. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, so I got to hold it like that. Is that right then? Like that?
I've just got. All I see is.
You may have taken a picture and sent it, or I don't know. It's just showing a sideways shot of the sun. It's not really seeming to be a video. I'm not sure if you're.
I've just got thingy playing me. What's it called?
OBS.
OBS.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
right
You're,
there.
don't worry about it, Anthony.
I'm showing you the magic. Sorry.
Yeah, Zach, turn your phone 90 degrees.
Like that? That looks funky now.
Nothing's changing on our screen, apparently. All I'm still seeing is your.
Here, I'm going to turn it off and then turn it back on real quick.
Yeah, do that. Drum roll.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there we go.
Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to make that big on my screen. That's really nice. Jealous.
California sun.
Horizontal again.
And then
Oh,
it
you
went back.
twisted.
There we go.
I've just got it properly to share now. There we go, Zach.
Zach, are you?
Yeah, I'm trying to take a picture of it.
Are you levitating? What are you doing?
No, I jumped out of Skype so I could take a picture of it to send to my mom. I always send her a picture of the sunrise and the sunset.
Well, Adam, what I want you to do, mate, if you don't mind, the picture that I sent in the Skype chat of the dog, the little white dog. Can you get that on screen?
I'm feeling like a fucking dog.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
It's a good dog picture, as much as I hate to say that. I mean, tasty though they are, there's something else in the picture that's good.
There is something else in the picture that's good.
Which chat are we talking?
In the Skype chat, the IRM Skype chat.
Oh, not the one that we're in, not the one we're talking in, the other one.
Yeah, the other one. No pressure.
I don't feel it. There you go, sir.
I'd keep a close eye on your chat. Has the chat been happy this whole show?
Oh crap!
Chat
I
has been
had to stay in chat.
quite active and quite interesting. I don't know. It's it's been interesting.
Which one's this, Tony?
We're not seeing anything yet.
Oh,
No, we're still seeing the sunset.
everybody else is.
Oh, right. This is my little dog. He's getting on to 13 years old now. They only live to about 15. But she got a new set of lights. They were quite expensive for what they are. And she dragged me out in the middle of a windstorm, like a windy, blustery period where it was like proper windy. And she wanted to use these lights, but we were running out of daylight and we were running out of time because we were coming home today. And she demanded that I came out and played around with this brolly thing that was like lights and whatnot. And in the background, you can see the Isle of Man. And that was the only thing I was really interested in. I know in the foreground, there's this pretty little dog. And he's lit up nicely in the dark and whatnot. But in the background. The Isle of Man's in the background. It's just a nice picture. She didn't quite get the angle perfect, but it's good enough. So for me, it was like,
It's
yeah,
an
there's the Isle of Man
excellent
again.
shot. Excellent shot. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's cool,
picture.
isn't it? It's cool lighting effect that she's been playing with.
What's the dog's name? I know you're not interested, but
Mickey.
all right, Mickey.
Mickey. Yeah,
All
he's
right,
naughty.
Yeah.
He suits his name as well because Mickey's like a mischievous name, and he's definitely mischievous.
It's
He's
a
up to
very
all.
scout name, though, isn't it,
Yeah.
Mickey?
All right, Mickey.
Yeah. Mickey.
That's a good shot in the background, mate. The sun over the back's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm impressed with it.
Flatty. You never know.
Pardon?
Might get a flatty.
For that picture?
No, not for that picture. Your missus took that picture.
I know.
Well, then she gets the flatty.
Yeah, you plagiarist.
Do you know what though? She's still on the fence. She knows it's not a sphere, but she's not. She doesn't want to. She doesn't like admitting it because, it's like cognitive dissonance. It makes her feel a little bit
I know
awkward.
that song too well, my friend. Oh goodness.
That means she gets one of our awards. She gets one of the irony awards.
Yeah.
That's a lovely picture.
Michelle's constantly sending me stuff that is ridiculous about NASA and pointing out just obvious flaws and all that, but I don't think she'll tell you the Earth's flat quite yet.
No, it's a big jump, isn't it? I mean, we can all laugh at the International Space Station and some of the astronauts that they present to us that are supposed to be good and all that. We can laugh at them. But it's a big jump to go from, an International Space Station might not be true to the Earth's not, the Earth's flat. It's a big quantum leap.
I think
I love the look on Scott Kelly's face on that video, the thumbnail for that video.
Yes.
Like someone's pulled a gun on him or something.
Scott Kelly's the most dishonest bastard I've ever met. He knows he's doing it as well. He's smug and lying. He's smirking and lying to your face.
Josh, did you chat with Justin this week about that clip he got?
No. Well, we did in chat a little bit. One of our Twitter chat rooms, but that's about the extent of it. We haven't had a chance to get him on TFR or anything. But we need to get him back on.
Yeah, it's been a minute. We need to get him over there and over here, for that matter.
But it's in what you're talking about.
There was
Justin Harvey that has been on our show before. He's from We Are Change, Orlando. He does a lot of activism, not just flat Earth related, but he spoke to town councils about the fluoridation of the water. He went to a courtroom where there was a 9/11 lawyer, and he confronted him. And then not long, let's say sometime last year, he was at an event near where Scott Kelly was going to appear in Florida. He got in and was able to ask him a question about bubbles in space. Kelly, of course, hemmed and hawed around about flecks of paint being liberated from the harsh environment in space, and it was quite funny. # flecks of paint. And then not too long ago, he was there to apparently confront Joe Biden. Is what he was there to do. And Scott Kelly hopped out of the limo before Biden did. So he got to encounter him again and confront him yet again about the bubbles in space. And like Zach said, the look on his face is like he got a gun pulled on him or something. It's too great.
And I loved it when he said, "Yeah, we know." Oh, that was just great. That gave me chills the first time I heard it.
I still like that video of Buzz Aldrin punching that bloke. I know the other story to it is, he was getting in his face and he was bugging him. Yeah, so he stepped through the punch. It's funny how they'll argue that like if you lose your patience and you lose your temper with any other person in real world, you get done for the assault, right? But when Buzz Aldrin does it, it seems to be okay because the other guy was provoking him. Doesn't work like that, does it? If it's you that loses your temper and you end up punching someone, you're the one that gets done, regardless of the fact that you that you were provoked. But when Buzz does it, doesn't matter.
Bart's still putting out information. He's still putting out videos pretty steady, actually. Bart.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he is.
He's still a denier, though, isn't he? He still thinks he lives on a ball.
Yeah, I sent him some invites early on in our TFR adventures, and not long after that, I saw his I'm Not a Flat Earther video, or whatever you want to call it.
Theorizing that one could time travel within his own lifetime, Dr. Sam Beckett stepped into the quantum leap accelerator and vanished.
Sorry, I used to love the hell out of this TV show.
Trapped in the past, facing mirror images that were not his own, and driven by an unknown force to change history for the better. His only guide on this journey is Al, an observer from his own time, who appears in the form of a hologram that only Sam can see and hear. And so Dr. Beckett finds himself leaping from life to life, striving to put right what once went wrong, and hoping each time that his next leap will be the leap home.
If you ever watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, watch season 10, episode 1. And it's all kind of about quantum leap, but they all jump into being black people and find out what it's like to be black. And it's like a musical. They sing the whole time. But Scott Bakula's even in it. He's got a small part.
I remember that episode. He's the driver, isn't he? And
no, he's a janitor.
Janitor. Maybe there's several episodes where he becomes a black character then, because the one I saw, he becomes a driver for this old deer, and maybe he's not just a driver. That's just the scene I'm remembering, because he was maybe he's like the butler, so to speak, for this elderly woman. I just remember them driving along, and he leaves the indicator on. She's like, "You're going to run down my battery," and he's like, "Well, actually, you've got this thing called the alternator," and she's like, "Don't correct me."
All I remember is, oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Well, the most distinct thing I think of that's super relevant at the moment is Al is assisted by basically an iPhone.
Yeah.
What was it? Ziggy
that he used to hit. So he's basically got an iPhone with a malfunctioning touch pad. So he's constantly hitting it.
Dropped his phone and cracked the screen.
Yeah, he's got a cracked screen. That's basically what Ziggy is. Just a cracked iPhone from the future. But they programmed us all with that concept of having these personal communicators. Same with Star Wars and Star Trek, rather.
Well, I don't know the answer to any of your questions here, Guy, but let me just look it up and I'll find you out what the answers are. We've got all the information stored right here on this handy little device. Now I can just find the answers immediately.
Yeah, they had it in Red Dwarf too. In Red Dwarf, it was called the psi scan. So any problem that they ever encountered, they'd just use the psi scan and it would tell them exactly what they were encountering. Oh, what's this fish we've found? Oh, this fish, it killed itself. It voluntarily closed its own gills. How do you know? Psi scan. It's just like Ziggy. Where are we? Well, Ziggy says we're in the 1700s. Thanks, Ziggy. What would we do without you? How did you get that data?
Get ready for Bobos.
I was just say it's the embedding of the acceptance of science as an authority figure.
Absolutely correct. That's what I was hoping.
Anything to get us away from nature.
No, it's the acceptance of what the iPhone says.
Yeah.
So if you do a quick Google search, the Earth's a sphere, right? There it says it. It says that it's science on the first reference on Google. You can even ask Siri, "Hey Siri, what's the shape of the Earth?" Shape of the Earth is a sphere, of course. Don't you know science, you muppet? You know what I mean? So you just ask Ziggy, and we've all been programmed that you ask Ziggy, and the thing that Ziggy says is true. Well, No, you've got to have a bit more critical thought. But if you've been programmed from the 80s that just ask Ziggy, when you get your own little Ziggy, you're like, what does the iPhone say? iPhone says ball. Okay, ball, look, I've got the answer right here. Just show you my Ziggy.
Whoa. That got perverted quick. Keep your Ziggy to yourself.
Good morning. I'm here.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
What is dark matter?
Okay, we don't know.
That's great. That's why it's called dark.
It's exactly.
Everyone knows all reputable information comes from random people on the internet. Tell me things, internet. The earth is flat. It's like school in your hand.
It's like school in your hand.
There's a point to that, Nathan. That was something my kids showed to me. It's not what it's called now. There's a cartoon on Netflix. What was it? Cupcake and Dino. And it's a quote out of that that my kids obviously watched and then came running to their dad. Dad! Look, they got Flat Earth in Cupcake and Dino.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a Netflix original, apparently. I don't know what that means.
That means they bought the rights from somebody else.
Big part of the popular culture.
Yeah.
It really has. At this point,
Nathan, I'm going to feel real bad. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
I got nothing. Zach, you go
I was
right
just
ahead.
going to say, I'm going to feel real bad for your daughter's science teachers. She has got such an education already, just hearing you talking on your on the debate show. Her science teachers aren't going to know what to do.
I think anybody that challenges her intellectually, I think, is going to be in for a shock.
Never thought about it.
You've got a few years
she's
yet,
be 6
mate.
or 7 talking about the scientific method. Yeah. Oh, she's going to have it backwards, forwards, upside down. Yeah, they're like sponges at that age. Like I said, she's going to be quite the bright cookie.
I hope so.
I think listening to that debate, mate, it all goes in. It all goes in, doesn't it? At that age, I think as Zach says, it's going to be fun when they get to school. It's when they get if she's anything like her dad, the natural ability.
So I don't want to be told that she's called someone a pretender clown muppet.
I'm afraid.
However correct she is,
a time or two, sir.
I don't think pretender clown muppet's the risk, Nathan. It's more moron.
Oh, the other kids a bunch of crayon munchers.
Yeah.
I like that.
I was talking to a couple of ballers recently, and I was asking, like, why is it that they're still on protest? Because they're quite fickle. They'll change their mind about different things, about, depending on what day of the week it is. So I just wanted to be up to date with what the current reason is. And basically, it's because, well, there's mainly 3 reasons. But the main reason is because Nathan likes to mute one particular person so much that he's censoring reality. And obviously, they're on about Rumpus. I don't think he really mutes too many other people like regularly, but Rumpus has to be muted because he just destroys the whole hangout. It's not because his points are valid; it's just because he ruins the hangout. But that's the main reason now, and I think it's ridiculous because basically what they want to be able to do is force their bullshit down our throats, right? Without us being able to protest. And Nathan's just like, no, I don't think so. And I completely agree. If you're going to come in and expect to be just given carte blanche to say whatever you want, whatever nonsense you want, no, that's not how it works. Bring evidence, tell us the truth, and then you might get a conversation. But if you're not going to tell the truth and you're going to demand that we listen to you whilst you spout your nonsense, absolutely agree with Nathan. Mute the guy because the guy can't say stuff that's not true. And if they don't like it, they can't come back in. And that's the position they're at the moment. Oh, well, we're on protest and we're not coming back in. Yeah, that's okay. We'll just sit there and we'll just talk about all the things that basically we don't want them to come in to talk about anyway. So it works in our favour, but it's because they don't like being told that they can't tell us the nonsense. It's really horrible, isn't it?
My heart bleeds.
Yeah. Anyway, gents, I'm going to drop because it's time for me to hit the sack. So I shall love you, leave you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anthony. Love you, man.
And we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, cheers, pal.
Love you, man. You have a good one.
See you later, guys.
Yeah.
God bless, mate.
Keep plugging
Bye-bye
away,
for now.
man. Good luck with your
Bye-bye.
schooling.
Where are we at? What time are we on?
It's
2
coming up
o'clock.
on 4 hours.
Pretty much that time.
Yeah, I think Anthony's called it well. Nathan,
Yes, I
thank you
believe
to
he
you,
has.
pal. Appreciate it
Absolutely.
tonight. It was good.
It's been a pleasure. Pass on my sentiments to John. I know he's not here already, but he's I said it earlier. But I do think what he said today is seminal. In other words, he's admitting that he has to relinquish it. And although it was said slightly in frustration, I don't want to say anger, but you could hear him almost gritting his teeth while he was saying, "Well, sod science." Then it's like, good. I'm because he was. I don't know if he was kind of introducing it tentatively or saying, "Oh, you're not going to like this." But I absolutely loved it. It's like, no, that's the attitude. You don't need science. Sod science. What do you need science for? To look at something. You don't. So I'm really grateful of his attitude. So hopefully, you'll pass on my sentiments next time you speak.
Right, that's why I said hold that thought and wait till Nathan. You'll make his day. So I knew.
Genuinely, because there's others. I don't want to mention them yet because they've not necessarily publicly disclosed that this is their attitude, but certainly privately, several people have approached me and gone, "I really didn't like you for a couple of days." I'm like, "Okay, what have I done?" And they're like, "Well, basically, you're pissing over my education, saying that it's not science." I'm like, "Okay, what is it you do?" This stuff, something not science. Okay, yeah, well, unfortunately, it isn't science. And they're like, "Well, yeah, I've gone away and I'll have a look, and you're right." And you go, "Okay, that's really reassuring. I'm glad you're taking this seriously." And they've said, "Well, I'm going to start modifying my language." And it's because, as I keep saying, I just don't want anybody who's making assertions about the obvious nature of reality to be called a pseudoscientist. I just can't bear the thought of it. When we've got such cracking proof, when we've got the obvious nature of reality to prove our point with, that doesn't need scientific validation. It's just obvious. And when you dress it up with science, some arsehole will come along and say, "Hold on a second, where's your independent variable?" And somebody like John will go, what? How can you descend this really cracking evidence into farce by demanding that I validate it through systematic experimentation? I don't need to. Why the hell should I? It's not necessary. So yeah, I did appreciate it. It did make my day.
I agree
Yeah, I
with you,
think
Matt.
you're doing everybody a great service, and just keep ramming it down everybody's throat, Nathan.
I've got one last
Enjoy it.
request, Nathan, and that's, could you just please re-describe what the formula that me and Zach were trying to put together?
Oh, right. So you're saying you're going to take into account the angle of elevation, the angular size limitation, and perspective itself.
It was a presupposing.
Whilst I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So it's begging the question perspective inclusive curve calculator.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I want that for tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. So yeah, thanks for the input on that as well, mate. But it's I like the description. Tickled me.
Can't wait to see that. It'll be a proper car crash.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That said, if you know any programmers that'd be willing to build a little calculator out of a spreadsheet, that'd be awesome. We could just throw it up there on the website.
Yeah.
I think somebody did do this once. I know you're looking to close out soon, but I think Block for Block, a YouTuber, I vaguely remember him modelling it out with a lot of these aspects inclusive, and it got really ridiculous really quick. Like the horizon should have been dropping off visually for everybody almost immediately. It got pretty crazy.
I think I do remember that now that you say that. Some of the first stuff he did was coming out and showing these, I guess, 3D models or 3D renders that he had done. Something, you say that does resonate.
It is ringing a bell, but it's just buried too far back in my hard drive here.
Yeah, it's at least 2 or 3, maybe 6 months ago. So that's like 5 years in flat Earth terms.
Right.
Right. At this rate, that'll make this exit feel like about an hour and a half. So
Right.
I'm going to get us ready. Josh, are you there, bruv?
Oh, yeah. I'm always here.
I mean, with the buttons to press.
With the bye-bye time.
You know it.
With the
Always
bye-bye
have.
noise.
Well, Josh,
Thank you all in chat.
To John as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Thank you so much, Nathan, for everything.
Yeah, we love
Always
him.
a pleasure, Nathan.
Yep. Indeed.
Zach, where's Zach gone? He's the one displaying, isn't he? I thought he dropped Zach. Sorry,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
me.
still
I'm
here.
enjoying your sunset, and it's asking
I
me
am.
to see
I'm
the
enjoying
pictures I'm enjoying.
Nathan, I'll try and catch you tomorrow, and if not, happy birthday for tomorrow, mate. Well done, mate.
Absolutely.
A real momentous thing you've achieved there. Well done, mate.
Plug it. Tune into tomorrow's Flat Earth debate, celebrating a year of Flat Earth debate. Thank you very much for having me again.
And congratulations. Everybody headed over to the Nathan Oakley 1980 channel over there on YouTube. Subscribe. Hit that bell notification. It's able to go off a couple times a day at least. So it's always handy to have that bell notification on. That way you're up to date with the Flat Earth debate. How do you like that? All right, with that, I think it's time to get out of here. Oh, quit it. That's not what I wanted. Oh, because I'm on the wrong soundboard. That's on my Flat Earth. Nope, that's on my my Ironworks.
That's Ironworks. My dudes.
This is the one I wanted. Yeah, that's it. I knew it's around there somewhere.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody in chat. I tried to participate a little bit in the beginning, but yeah, I fell out pretty quick.
I did too. It got away from me. I couldn't keep up. You guys are always amazing in chat. Whoa. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, God bless. Good night, everybody. Love you all. Take care.
Good
Love
night,
you,
Phil.
Adam. Thank you, man.
Love you. And just so we can get our weekly copyright strike, I think I'm going to exit with a little bit of My Vibration song I ran across again after several years of having forgotten it. Just resonated with me today. I wanted to play it just because it's good stuff. But I love you guys, and we will see you all right back here next week. Have no fear. We'll be right here.
Sunrise shone on me with endless possibility. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. Help me right my wrongs, channeling these freedom songs, projecting positivity. Help me resonate and elevate to higher states. I wanna feel the ocean breathe. Let me be the peace, so Hana is my family. A dreamer always chases dream. This is my vibration. Learning to love when I want to hate. Needing to bend when I'm gonna break. This is my vibration. Know you always got a friend in me. This is my vibration. Can you hear the voice of just one man against them all? Can you see the way he feels through all the writings on the walls? I hate to say I'm fighting, but I'm standing for a cause. Yes, I'm standing my ground, and there's no backing down. Everyone's connected by vibrations from the sounds of music and voice. Yes, we all have a choice. This is my vibration. Know you always got a friend in me. is my vibration. My vibrations are the reason for the wind. These heavy storms will never stop from blowing in. This lonely feeling killing me from down within. Sometimes I feel like I will find an early end. This is mine, there's no time. So hear my voice among the bustle of the world. And know throughout it all you were the only girl. This is my vibration. Learning to love when I want to hate. Fade into bed when I'm gonna break. This is my vibration. My mission is inspiration. Stay happy in this life I lead. No time for hating, so follow me to a brighter day ahead. Feel free. This is my time to shine my vibration. This is my vibration. Know you always got a friend in me. This is my vibration. This is my vibration. Know you always got a friend.